Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands, Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight, much of the southwest staying dry. The winds noticed coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start, cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too. There's some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon, but the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 18th of April.
The shocking story of a migrant saved from deportation by a mutinous Air France crew now pleads guilty to raping a 15-year-old girl. He will be staying in the UK.
This comes as the House of Lords again delays the passage of the landmark Rwanda bill, which had been expected to pass today. contrary to expectations, the Lords aren't backing down on their wrecking amendments.
Tory sleaze, long-standing MP Mark Menzies is stripped of the Conservative whip after a bizarre 3 a.m. phone call had him demanding thousands in campaign cash to free him from being locked up by bad people.
And reborn in the USA. Prince Harry declares his official country of residence as the United States of America. Fresh document filings reveal. Has the prince given up on Blighty for good? Now, so much to cover today, and of course, through it all, gbnews.com/yoursay is your way to get involved. Now, today I'm with a lovely Emma Webb, because Emily is away on holiday, sunning herself in somewhere that I'm told is not Rwanda. But lovely to be with you today, and what a crazy day it is, given that we've got another Tory MP no longer taking the whip.
Yes, yet another one. Pardon the double entendre there, Tom. It just never seems to end. I mean, we've only just had William Bragg, and now, obviously, this story too. It really raises some serious questions about MPs' security and their common sense.
And it does have all of these sort of evocative feelings of the 1990s, where you had all these stories of Tory sleaze. There was something called autoerotic asphyxiation that happened to one MP who sadly passed away in the mid-1990s. It just has all of these harbingers of John Major's sort of dying days of government.
And, of course, this is not the first time either that Menzies has been caught up in a scandal like this.
Certainly hasn't. I mean, he lost his ministerial status in the early coalition years. You'd have thought that he might have been deselected then, that they might have done something about it then, but clearly not.
Absolutely, and what's particularly interesting as well is that these stories about Tory sleaze seem to very, very quickly swamp out any discussion of similar stories in the news about the Labour Party, as we've seen with Angela Rayner this week. So this is now the biggest story.
That's certainly true, but there is so much more to talk about. We'll be covering it all here on Good Afternoon Britain. But first, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Labour are calling for police to investigate what opposition ministers have described as extraordinary allegations that an MP misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, Mr Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who he said locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. He denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. He'll sit as an independent in the House of Commons while the allegations are investigated. In Scotland, the prescription of puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones for children has been paused. It follows a landmark CAS review of gender services for under-18s, which revealed children had been let down by a lack of research and weak evidence on medical interventions. Ministers in Scotland have welcomed the move, but campaigners argue the decision is the wrong one. Like other parts of the UK, Scotland has seen a rapid rise in the number of young people questioning their identity or experiencing gender dysphoria. In England, the NHS has already stopped prescribing puberty blockers. Commons leader Penny Mordaunt has said MPs will consider further Lords amendments to the Rwanda bill on Monday. The House of Lords ignored ministerial calls to back down and again last night insisted on further revisions to the bill. The government has promised to do whatever it needs to do to get flights off the ground. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told us this morning the Rwanda plan is the deterrent the UK needs to stop migrants illegally crossing into Britain.
Let's pass this Rwanda bill. Let's stop messing around, as Keir Starmer was telling his Lords to do last night, by chucking this out again. So the Commons is going to have to come back and vote on it. We've already voted for it numerous times. And let's actually break this illegal chain of people being brought here.
It's been revealed that UK aid funding has been invested in an overseas firm that backs a social media site offering sexual services and promoting the Hamas attack on Israel. MPs are demanding answers from Lord Cameron and the Foreign Office following the findings in a report from the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. More than £6 million of funding went to the India Quotient Fund last year. The watchdog is warning the UK faces a major reputational risk because of those findings. A criminal gang involved in a website which taught subscribers how to defraud thousands of victims in the UK has been shut down by British police. 480,000 card numbers belonging to as many as 70,000 people were accessed via the website LabPost, with criminals subscribing to the site taught how to access bank details and PIN numbers. Since its creation, the site's received just under £1 million in subscriptions from criminal users. Detective Superintendent Helen Rance says many more arrests will be made in the coming weeks.
Within the UK, we've managed to identify 25,000 victims, and taking down an enabling service like this is absolutely what we need to do to tackle fraud. We need to get ahead and to dismantle an enabler such as LabHost.
Support for the Conservative Party has hit a record low with just 19% of public backing. That's according to a poll by Ipsos. The Prime Minister's satisfaction rating has also dropped to a historic low of -59, matching John Major's record. The public also appear divided on a Conservatives' leadership change, with 37% calling for a shift. Sir Keir Starmer maintains his lead in the polls, but he too faces a drop in satisfaction, down from 29% to 25% since February. Prince Harry has officially listed the United States as his primary residence. According to documents filed in the UK, the change was made last summer. He and his wife Meghan moved to America after stepping back from royal duties in 2020. Dubai is still grappling with the aftermath of a record-breaking storm that's brought much of the desert city to a standstill. Thousands of passengers have had flights cancelled and severe floodings trapped residents inside homes while waterlogged roads are cleared. Some inbound flights at Dubai's international airport have resumed, but on the whole, the airport says it's still barely functional. The unprecedented rainfall has sparked speculation about cloud seeding. That's something the UAE has denied. And Nellie the elephant said goodbye to the circus and decided to take a stroll. Residents in Butte in Montana in the United States had an unexpected visitor as Viola, an adventurous elephant, escaped a travelling circus. Caught on camera, Viola wandered through the streets before being gently guided away. And despite the drama, sparking both amusement and concern among locals, Viola returned home unharmed. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, a failed asylum seeker whose deportation flight was blocked has now pleaded guilty to raping a 15-year-old girl. Mr. Mayela's flight to the Republic of Congo was stopped by an Air France cabin crew after claims deportation minders had taped his legs and handcuffed him. Well, he subsequently claimed deportation was against his human rights and stayed in the UK.
He became a poster boy against deportation flights of illegal migrants, posing with a sign saying, "Migrants are not criminals." You couldn't write this. This news comes as the passage of the Rwanda bill has been delayed by the House of Lords, blocking resettlement flights for those who enter the UK illegally.
Well, GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us now. And Olivia, this couldn't paint a worse backdrop for yet another day of delay. We were thinking it could have passed. The whole bill could have passed today. Now it's kicked into yet another week.
Exactly, Tom. What we were expecting to happen last night was for the Lords' opposition to melt away. The government has a sizable, just about still, majority in the House of Commons. So the Lords, we thought, would put up a bit of a fight. But when it became clear that the government was determined to pass its flagship legislation, that sort of support for the blocking amendments would fall away. But that didn't happen. Last night, the Lords pushed through 2 different blocking amendments to this Rwanda bill, which means that the bill will be back in the House of Commons on Monday. Eventually, one way or another, the government will almost certainly win this. It is a flagship piece of legislation from the Prime Minister, and the Lords, it would be democratically pretty tricky for the Lords to try and continue to block it. The problem is there is a pretty tight timeline on all of this. Rishi Sunak has said that he wants to get flights off the ground by the spring. Well, we're well into the middle of April by now, and even once the bill has received royal assent, probably at some point next week, we can expect another 6-week delay due to paperwork, potential legal challenges, etc. So we're getting very, very close to Rishi Sunak's deadline, and of course we're getting very close to the local elections as well. If no flights have left for Rwanda by the 2nd of May, well, that will be the nail in the coffin, I suspect, of Rishi Sunak's hopes for the local elections.
Olivia, what do you think the political costs will be of this for the Conservative Party going into those next elections? Is there a real worry that the Labour peers in particular might be trying to slow this down even more with the hope that this will damage the Conservatives?
I think that is definitely the worry for the Conservatives. There was a hope among Conservative MPs who I spoke to that Labour peers would be reluctant to block the bill on the grounds that they expect that soon a Labour Party will be in power in the House of Commons, and they wouldn't want to set a precedent for peers blocking government legislation. Well, if they were worried about that, that worry seems to have melted away, because last night Labour peers were all too happy to push through not one but two wrecking amendments to that bill. It is all a question of timing. The reason why Lords are still bothering to push ahead with these amendments, even though they know that ultimately they will be defeated, is because the longer this drags out, the more likely it is that no flights will be off the ground by the local elections. And that would be really, really damaging to Rishi Sunak's leadership position.
Really damaging indeed. Well, Olivia Utley, thank you very much for joining us live from Westminster. Let's get some more now with the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Kevin, this is just a mess that Rishi Sunak did not want to see. Why did everyone get it so wrong, thinking it could be passed this week?
Well, that was certainly what we were being led to believe, that the government were keen to get it passed this week. And that's why everyone was very surprised. I was certainly surprised when I found out yesterday afternoon that instead of the bill returning to Parliament, to the House of Commons last night, after the Lords passed those two amendments, it wouldn't be until next week. It could have been back today, but I'm told that Conservative MPs were put on a one-line whip, which basically means that they don't need to turn up. There are no important votes for them to take part in. And it's all very strange, because this is supposed to be, if you remember, emergency legislation. When it was first announced by Rishi Sunak back in November, the idea that it wouldn't have passed 5 months later, I think, would have been incredibly surprising if it was indeed meant to be an emergency. I mean, this has fallen on from the fact that it was delayed before Easter as well. There was a lot of surprise that the government didn't try harder to get it through Parliament before Easter. So, yeah, it just seems very odd, as we were just hearing, given that Rishi Sunak has vowed to get these flights off the ground this spring.
Some might question Rishi Sunak's political judgment, given that he seems to have set himself up to fail here. Do you think that that was political naivety on his part? What reason would he have to make promises like by spring this year, in the knowledge that obviously Labour peers in particular are going to push back so much against this?
Well, of course, he's got form for making promises and not being able to keep them. If you remember, at the start of last year, he made the 5 pledges, one of them, of course, to stop the boats, and that clearly hasn't happened. He's managed to halve inflation, but the other promises are looking a little bit dodgy, to say the least. So, yeah, I don't understand. I really do not understand why he makes himself a hostage to fortune, and then, having made these promises, why he doesn't absolutely break his neck in order to try and keep them, especially at a time when the public are pretty cynical about politicians in general, but the Prime Minister in particular. We've seen again another poll this morning which shows that his own personal ratings have completely cratered.
Such an odd thing for the Prime Minister to sort of put his political fortunes in the hands of a House of Parliament where he controls only 1/3 of the seats. But, Kevin, we've also got to talk about the other enormous story today. Rishi Sunak's lost yet another MP. The majority that once stood at 80 seats is today down to just 43.
Yeah, Mark Menzies has lost the party whip over allegations of misusing campaign funds in his seat in Lancashire. And it's really the last thing that Rishi Sunak needed. We saw yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions, he went on the attack over Angela Rayner, trying to obviously create a sense of Labour sleaze. And yet, here we are again talking about the Conservatives. It's only a week or so since William Ragg also gave up the Conservative whip over the honey trap scandal. And yet, as I say, it is just the last thing that Rishi Sunak needs. And also, I saw, incidentally, it's maybe a minor detail, but it means now that Tory rebels need one fewer letter to go in to the 1922 committee in order to trigger a no-confidence vote. So who knows whether that may be significant or not.
Yeah, it's gone down from 53 to 52, I think, which is interesting.
As some have pointed out, actually, with respect to Angela Rayner, that this is a case of those who are in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Do you think that, obviously, this is the case with the Conservative Party criticising Angela Rayner and then having another scandal like this, that actually this is obviously a problem across the House and that Labour would suffer from similar reputational issues if or when they are in government? Do you think that this is a problem in the culture of Parliament more generally, rather than a party political issue?
Well, there are 18 MPs now sitting as independents who were previously elected either Conservative, mainly Conservative or Labour. I think there's one Plaid Cymru and one SNP MP as well. So yeah, it's not just a Tory issue. And no doubt, if there's a lot more Labour MPs after the election, then I guess they might well find themselves more likely, at least, to be in this type of situation. But as I say, it's the worst possible timing for Rishi Sunak. They're already miles behind in the polls. There's just this feeling now, it's almost like before the 1997 election when there was lots of Tory sleaze around then, and it just seems to feed itself, and it confirms the public's view, I think, that they want to see a change.
It's so interesting because it sounds horrible, and I don't sort of mean it like this, but I can sort of understand that in these seats that the Tories were sort of surprised that they won, they might not have had the best vetted candidates. There might be some Fruit Loops in and amongst those surprise wins. But Mark Menzies is in a safe seat, and he's held that seat for 14 years. He's been in scandals before. It's remarkable that there hasn't been any sort of process there. Sort of the red flags were there for everyone to see. He was waving them practically as vigorously and ferociously as he could. But Kevin...
It's astonishing, almost a decade worth of trouble.
Yes, absolutely. Kevin, we have run to the end of this segment, but thank you very much for joining us and talking us through these extraordinary stories out of Westminster today. But much more coming on the programme. Around 70 asylum seekers staying at RAF Wethersfield have been moved after serious safety risks. Well, we'll be live on the ground very shortly. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, Britain's election channel.
& Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at, actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 21 minutes past 12. Now, the Home Office has been forced to move asylum seekers out of an ex-RAF base in Essex. This after safety concerns were identified on the site, including radiological contamination and unexploded ordnance.
It's another setback for the Home Office and their attempts to reduce the number of hotels being used as temporary accommodation. Our reporter, Ray Addison, is there for us. Hi, Ray.
Hello there to you both. Yes, this is a bit of a humiliating turnaround for the Home Office, just months after they sort of marked their own homework, if you like, and deemed that the site was safe and fit for purpose. We find out that 70 have been now removed from former RAF Wethersfield here and taken back to hotels, which, of course, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has been very keen to stress that he doesn't want asylum seekers in hotels because that's expensive and they want them in sites like this behind me. Now, the safety risks that have been identified include levels of radiation and unexploded ordnance as well. So obviously this kind of base has been used by military forces over the years, and there's a risk inside that there could be unexploded ordnance like artillery shells, for example. Now, this site is one of the Home Office's largest accommodation sites for asylum seekers. It could house up to 800 people. Now, the original plan was for about 1,700. Home Office are telling us they won't comment on how many people are currently here at the moment, but locals say they've heard it's around the 600 level. Now, last month they got planning permission to use this site for 3 years. They got a special development order granted, an SDO, which circumvented the council planning permission requirements, and there were concerns in that SDO about the risk of contaminants. Now, it does appear that those concerns have been realised. I've been here since about 6 a.m. this morning, and I've seen little white minibuses coming and going, taking the asylum seekers out to local towns and villages and the like, but also right at the very start of the day, 2 men left on foot, and I got the chance to shout a couple of quick questions to them. This is what they had to say. We'll have a quick chat. No? No. Are you guys worried about the contamination on the site? Where are you off to? Yeah. Where are you going?
Walking.
Oh, what job do you have? Well, I think it's very interesting from that brief conversation I had with the two men there that it sounded like they said they were off working. And of course, asylum seekers who are waiting for their claims to be processed cannot have a job. They're the only two gentlemen that I've seen coming out on foot. They're the only two I've had the chance to ask that question to. But obviously that would be of concern to the Home Office if there are people here at this accommodation site going out and working in the local community. I have to say, though, we are in quite a rural area. The nearest village is about 20 minutes away by car. So I really don't know where they would be working, although we are surrounded by fields. So there's that possibility. Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, has said that these latest issues highlight why the Home Office was wrong to use the Wethersfield site for asylum accommodation. She says that she warned them that it was unsuitable and that the plans were flawed.
This is just the most extraordinary story, Ray. There was a moment when you said, I've been here since 6 a.m, and I was about to say, I was about to ask, sort of, have you grown an extra leg? Have you sort of started sprouting sort of radioactive superpowers? But it does seem, Ray, that these sort of allegations of radiological contamination. I mean, this seems like the sort of spurious, vexatious challenge that is just trying to turf people out. I mean, people have been living here for a long time. No one's turned into Spider-Man.
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, I don't know if you saw my interview, which I had in the last hour or so. I was speaking to Andrew Hull. He's the chairman of the Wethersfield Air Base Scrutiny Committee. Now, about a year ago, they commissioned their own, what they call, desktop survey, and they got an expert to assess by speaking to people who've worked on this site over the last many years, going back as far as they could, to find out what kind of activities have been carried out on here and what kind of potential hazards there could be. And in that interview, he said that they've highlighted a number of serious concerns and that they need to be investigated before anybody is actually on this site living, using it for accommodation. Of course, that's too late. That's already happened. And now we're starting potentially to see the effects of this, where now people are being taken back out and put in hotels because of concerns over contaminants.
Goodness me, it does smack of the sort of newt counting that often you see that prevents things being built or people being moved around in this country. But Ray Addison, thank you very much, live from that site. Really interesting story there. But of course, the Home Office has been in touch. They've had this to say in response. We've always been clear that the use of asylum hotels is unacceptable, which is why we moved asylum seekers to former military sites, which we ensure are safe to accommodate asylum seekers prior to use. But shall we go to Downing Street now? Because Christopher Hope, our political editor, is there for us. He's just been speaking with the Prime Minister's official spokesman. Chris, what do you have for us?
Hi, Tom, that's right. Well, some big news after last night's double defeat in the House of Lords. Those two amendments pushed back on the Safety of Rwanda plan to get these flights taking off by the end of the spring, as the PM has been saying as recently as last week. Number 10 are now saying they will now not say that these Rwanda flights will take off this spring. That means they've essentially lost a week on their timetable. They are now planning to push all this through in a very dramatic sitting in the House of Commons and House of Lords on Monday, and it's likely to get royal assent for the Safety of Rwanda bill on Thursday. They've lost a week in their timetabling, and in a briefing just now with the PM's official spokesman, he would not say that the first flights will take off for the spring. That is significant because as recently as last week, April the 9th, the PM, Rishi Sunak, was meeting with Paul Kagame, the leader of Rwanda, behind me in the building in Downing Street. He was saying then that the first flights will take off by the end of spring. That is now not the case. We will get a new timetable for Rwanda flights taking off if it goes through both the Commons and the Lords successfully on Monday. A big moment, a big setback for the Prime Minister and his plan to, yes, stop the boats.
Chris, why would the Lords back down on Monday when they didn't today?
The government is hoping that they can push it through the Commons and indicate that with the majority in the Commons of around 50 or 60 for both those amendments, the Lords will fold. But I was talking last night to Tory peers with knowledge of what the government's doing. They said it could ping-pong ping-pong 6 times. And Monday is the 4th exchange of fire between the Commons and Lords. It could be another 2 or 3 times after that. What's clear from the briefing just now with the official spokesman of the PM, they are likely to go late on Monday and sit and try and get this through. And then hopefully it's law by Thursday next week. So the government's been planning yesterday. Today was the day this bill will become law. They've lost a week. And they're now saying this is threatening getting these flights off by the end of the spring, which is June 21st, before you look it up on Google.
I can seem to remember, I think someone quite famous once said the definition of insanity was trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But perhaps the members of the upper house do meet that definition of insanity. But Chris, also got to ask you on the big news today in the Tory parliamentary party, Mark Menzies losing the Tory whip in the most peculiar of circumstances.
And that's right, Mark Menzies has lost the Tory whip. There's no comment from the briefing just now with the Prime Minister's spokesman. It's a matter for the parliamentary party. But yes, as we say, Mark Menzies has lost the whip while the investigations carry on into, well, the extraordinary allegations in the Times about asking money from a key aide, thousands of pounds. He was locked up in a room at 3 a.m. and so it goes on. It's all there. I mean, yes, nothing to be said from the government today.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Hope bringing us the very latest there from Downing Street and new dates for our diary. I write one of these down every single day. I've scribbled out Thursday. Today was meant to be the day that Rwanda, the bill became law. Now it's next Thursday.
You're such a terrible nerd, Tom. In just a moment, we'll be speaking to transgender charity runner Glenique Frank, who has run marathons as a man, a woman and a non-binary. That's 3 different gender categories. But first, let's get your news headlines.
Emma, thank you. The top stories this hour. Labour are calling for police to investigate what opposition ministers have described as extraordinary allegations that an MP misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, Mr Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who he says locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. He denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. He's also been suspended from his role as one of Rishi Sunak's trade envoys to South America. For now, he'll sit as an independent in the House of Commons while the allegations are investigated. Downing Street has refused to confirm if flights will get off the ground this spring in the wake of the latest blow to its flagship plan. In the House of Lords last night, it's understood Number 10 will publish more detail about the timing of the first flights once the bill has passed through Parliament. MPs will consider further Lords amendments to the bill next week. In Scotland, the prescription of puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones for children has been paused. It follows a landmark Cath review of gender services for under-18s, which revealed children had been let down by a lack of research and weak evidence on medical interventions. Ministers in Scotland have welcomed the move, but campaigners argue the decision is the wrong one. In England, the NHS has already stopped prescribing puberty blockers. LNER train drivers have announced another strike on Saturday, leading to the cancellation of around 3 in 4 services. Members of ASLEF will walk out for the day and ban overtime over the weekend in a fresh dispute over terms and conditions. The rail operator says it'll run just 26% of its usual routes between London, Edinburgh and West Yorkshire, equivalent to around 40 services. The walkouts are separate to the long-running dispute over pay between ASLEF and 16 train operators, including LNER. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel. Northbound on the M1, a lane closure to a broken down lorry between Rugby at 18 through to junction 19 for the Catsop interchange. Traffic is coping well. Southbound on the M1, a lane closure to a broken down vehicle from 15A for Northampton services through to 15 for Northampton. Again, traffic on the move. Southbound on the M1, there's also slow traffic to a broken down vehicle at 11A for Dunstable and Luton North. There's also ongoing roadworks. All lanes have reopened, but the delays still remain. Northbound on the M3, 2 lanes closed, queue in traffic to an accident from Basingstoke at junction 6 through to Hook at junction 5. On the westbound side of the M27, all lanes have reopened following an earlier broken down vehicle at Wickham. All lanes have reopened, the vehicle has cleared and traffic on the move, so that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told you.
We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5. It'd be MI5 to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote because that's
not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean, how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this and they will just say enough because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment and obviously our houses are full of items we bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them
from
it.
That was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
Point is, though, go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 12. Now, a transgender charity runner has run marathons as a man, as a woman, and as a non-binary person too.
And after running in the non-binary division in the Boston Marathon, Glenique Frank has finished all 6 world major marathons, raising around £36,000 for charity.
Quite a feat. Well, we're delighted to say that she joins us now. Glenique, thank you so much for coming into the studio and meeting with us today, because as far as I understand it, you've got perhaps a problem with the way in which marathons and sports sort of... It's not quite all settled yet. It's a bit confusing for lots of people.
Yeah, it is. I think it's just... again, an awareness. And what happened to me last year was quite brutal, the abuse and threats I got for entering under a simple category, because when I enter any race or even a job application under gender orientation, there's only limited categories, so male, female, non-binary or other. No offence to non-binary and other. I don't want to be called other. I know who I am. I'm a transgender woman. And that's the whole thing with any sport now, any applications. There's no tick box. I don't want to categorise people in that category and highlight, because I got abused for that as well. Just say, oh, now you're putting us in categories. No, it's just that when I enter a race, you know, I'm a sports person, I'm a personal trainer, and I do doing it for WizKids this year again. And the thing is, I just entered under women because I know I'm going to be a transgender woman. And the athlete that called me out, it's her, you know, it was her, when she saw my interview, you know, she could have just phoned me personally, because it's all about then, oh, I cheated, you know, 14,000 other women out of a better position. I'm a charity run. I came 6,063rd or whatever it is. And I felt quite bad, and it did affect my mental health. But luckily, I'm a strong person. I've done a lot of marathons and I've done a lot of things. So I just want to call for, when you enter a race, the categories are just simple as an LGBT, maybe. And that covers everybody, because now there's a lot of people out there that don't want to be called Mr. or Mrs., which is great. But then in elite sport, this is where the grey area is. So the other thing is, I hear, Mara Yamanuchi, what you're saying, and I apologised on GB News last year to the shot put who came on. But the thing is, in elite sport, then it's quite simple, because I think that World Paralympics has just announced that the transgender category.
So you want that other option, so you don't have to apply...
I'm going to say there's two, say, divisions, so the non-athletes, so the masses, they want to know. There's a lot of people out there that are shy, that haven't got a voice, that are scared to speak up. The LGBT community, even heterosexual, straight people, whatever, they're too scared to say anything because they don't want to get hated on. So when I speak up and I see there's a problem in this, you know, it's not fair, there's equality and diversity, but I say, what about inclusivity? The CEO of London, you know, phoned me personally, in Chicago and Boston backed me, because, you know, it was quite cruel what they did. And I'm scared to run on Sunday. And I'm even
Which
announcing...
Which category will you be competing in?
Well, unfortunately, to keep the peace, which is this is another issue. Why am I getting another human to say, it's OK, you're non-binary this year. Oh, that's fine, you're all right now.
So you're not going to
cause trouble. Because I don't want to... me, Gleneek, this is the way I am. I don't want bad karma. I didn't want to enter under women again because I didn't want the aggro. But I should have entered under the women category. I'm not other, and I'm not non-binary.
Do you feel when you... So you've raced against men and also against women.
Humans.
Do you feel that obviously the argument is that biological men have a biological advantage over women?
I knew you were going to say that.
Do you feel that it is more fair for you to race against men, or whether you have an edge when you compete against women?
This is the thing. With elite sport, now there's two divisions. Puberty and all, and that.
In elite sport, for example.
Let me tell you now, the elite winner in Chicago, the woman, I think it was Hassan, she beat half the elite men. So check her testosterone levels. Mine are probably lower than yours, because you have T blockers, and when you go on hormone replacement, it does change your libido and changes your, I'm weaker now. I'm not competing against a woman because I'm stronger as a man, because my friend in South Africa can lift 50-kilogram barbell curls.
But it's bone size, isn't it? Because if you've been through male puberty, if I were to race you, no matter how much I trained, you'd probably win.
Well, on Sunday's Boston, I did 5 hours. And my friend, who's a girl, did it with a broken foot, and she did 4.5 hours. I'm telling you now, I'm a personal trainer, it's got nothing to do with that. But in elite sport, because there's money involved and public interest, then yes, I agree with, unfortunately, the transgender athletes that have just competed. Because Serena Williams also didn't want to compete against because it's not official yet. And that's what the whole thing is. So we need to have in the elite sport, if I'm racing in the elite, you're an elite woman and I'm an elite transgender woman, you still win your accolade and your prize money. I'm not racing against you.
So would you be then in favour of having, in both elite sports and for amateurs, having a separate category for transgender runners?
Just 4 categories: biological man, biological female, transgender man, transgender female. Because I'm changing my sex, whereas non-binary and sexual orientation, you're not changing your sex.
So let me ask you, if you were to... So you said it earlier when I said biological man, biological female, you said human. Why would you still have the difference between transgender man and transgender female if there's no biological difference?
Yeah, this is the thing in elite sport. When it comes to money, it's all about public interest again, and the men's game as against the female game. And there's always, again, there's this gender divide between male and female biological even, because look at the women's football. You know, look at any say, blacksmithing. You know, I watched Glow Up Britain, and there's, you know, people on there that, I'm in a female-dominated world. No, you're in the human world. You know?
Gleneek,
sport is different.
You've spoken about the backlash that you got from people when you ran in the female category in a marathon. I wonder, have you had backlash from other transgender people now that you've said perhaps there should be a separate third category?
Well, after London, when I said they mistook what I was saying about categories as in a tick box, not categorising into a pen. Oh, there's all the weird people, maybe, or there's all the heterosexual people, or there's all the no. Just a tick box to keep the peace because I entered under women.
But it's almost like you've come under attack from both sort of gender-critical activists, but also trans activists.
But I want to be the voice for transgender people and queer people and LGBT and straight people because I've got clients that have got body dysmorphia. I've got dysphoria, which I see ugly every morning.
Do you think that there would be support broadly amongst transgender athletes and sports people?
I hope so, because
in favour of having a separate trans category?
Because I know that, again, there was another news company that... journalists from around the world were phoning me, by the way. Canada, Australia, you talk around the world. And they said, do you have to give your medal and your prize money back? I didn't win. You know what I mean?
What's the medal
I apologise.
You've brought in today?
This is the 6 major marathons around the world. Under my own esteem, I earn my living and I paid. Then I'm raising money for charity at the same time.
Can you just hold it up for the camera again so we can all see that? That's
this is the
6
main
major
one.
marathons.
And I've done 28 marathons around the world.
Wow.
Because I want to spread the rainbow. This is what it's all about.
Well, Clinique, we really appreciate you coming in. Thank you for putting your case across. I think it will be very interesting for a lot of people hearing that idea for an extra category. Is that something that could perhaps be a more unifying thing in this very divisive debate? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your views, your say. Your say. Got it wrong.
You did it.
Oh,
you did it this
we
time.
were talking about getting the blooming address right, but plenty more throughout the show, including all the latest as the government sent the Rwanda bill back to the Lords again, with Number 10 refusing to confirm whether flights will now take off by the spring. We'll have all the detail after this.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands, Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight, much of the southwest staying dry. The winds notice coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start, cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too. There's some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon, but the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 1. Now, some Scottish primary schools are appointing primary school children, as LGBT champions. They're being urged to ask pupils as young as 4 if they're gay, lesbian or transgender.
Documents suggest that schools have been setting up LGBT clubs as part of their membership of a scheme run by the charity LGBT Youth Scotland.
Well, the charity reportedly received £1 million of taxpayer money last year and also urges head teachers to mark Transgender Day of Remembrance, as well as installing gender-neutral loos.
We can now speak to Dean Thompson, who is a writer for Think Scotland. Thank you for joining us, Dean.
Thank you for having me.
So explain to us a little bit more about this organisation that these schools are part of this scheme. Can you tell us a bit more about what it is that they're actually asking schools to do and why people are objecting so strongly to that?
The LGBT Youth Scotland is an organisation that has, like you said, received £1 million from taxpayers, 450,000 from the Scottish Government, 340,000 from councils that are cash-strapped, and £154,000 from the NHS boards. Now, part of what they're talking about is LGBT. This should not be seen as just going into schools and saying, being gay is normal, I'm gay. I would not have an objection to if that were the case. It's part of has been alleged as part of an ideological push to promote LGBTQ plus trans ideological and policy commitments that are more reflective of the political priorities of Holyrood, and sort of cut against some of the concerns that were raised, say, in the Cass review about clinical foundations not being as robust as they should when we're dealing with gender children who are not psychologically and developmentally fully formed yet. And the whole range of sort of policies that are being promoted in the schools include getting higher marks if you have gender-neutral bathrooms and things. And it's quite a broad ideological policy agenda in the schools.
It's very curious, this, because I don't think a single soul on this planet should oppose people teaching that some people have 2 mums, some people have 2 dads. But this is something very different. This is asking children to sort of be almost advocates, political representatives themselves.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as someone who is gay myself, I can guarantee that I was not fully aware of my own sexuality, as it were, until I was beginning at secondary school. So the idea that a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old can see and fully comprehend and understand the difference between gay, transgender, questioning, non-binary is for the birds. And it's highly questionable how much of this is motivated by best practice in terms of policy. I mean, the Scottish Government, and I've written articles, I think, Scotland in the past in relation to GRR reform, there's real evidence and real science in regards to the whole gender debate in Scotland about policy being the result of policy capture by special interest groups, which of course undermines the robustness of policy and public confidence in the democratic outcomes that we see from Holyrood in terms of legislation. And LGBT Youth Scotland as a charity organisation itself, it should be underscored that in the past, this is an organisation that had to self-refer itself to Police Scotland in the past over historical allegations of abuse. So it is highly questionable why they're receiving such a volume of money, taxpayers' money, in order to promote political and ideological commitments in what are schools. And in terms of the whole panoply, this is, of course, in the background of the Scottish Government's U-turn in relation to this Sandyforth clinic, which has now said that they're not going to be giving out the hormone blockers to anyone under 18. This is, of course, in light of the Cass review. And if the Scottish Government initially responded with...
Yes, Dean, it seems that the Scottish Government is very confused and all over the place on this issue. What do you think it is about the Scottish Government over the last couple of years that seems to have gone fairly doolally over these things?
Internal SNP problems, it's entirely political. The first, Humza Yousaf, when he became First Minister, he went out of his way to say, I'm Mr. Continuity, I'll promote Nicola Sturgeon's legacy. He alienated Kate Forbes and that whole more sceptical wing of the party in relation to the gender politics. And he is pretty much dependent, he's put himself where he's dependent on the Scottish Greens in government to support himself as First Minister. Because there's a lot of pushback with Fergus Ewing, Kate Forbes, within the SNP more generally, and grassroots concerns. So he's landed himself in a position where the Scottish Greens are really driving a lot.
Dean,
of
I'm afraid we are running to the end of the hour here, Dean, but thank you very much for coming on and talking through all that really serious stuff. Stay with us. We're going to be debating the NHS in the next hour. Should we pay for appointments?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands, Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight, much of the southwest staying dry. The winds noticed coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start, cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too. There's some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon, but the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker, good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was, ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah. It was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously. Brilliant singing. But the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is. And to this day.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 18th of April.
The shocking story of a migrant saved from deportation by a mutinous Air France crew now pleads guilty to raping a 15-year-old girl. He will be staying in the UK.
This comes as the House of Lords again delays the passage of the landmark Rwanda bill. It had been expected to pass today. Well, now Number 10 refuses to say whether flights will even happen by the end of the spring.
Tory sleaze. Long-standing MP Mark Menzies is stripped of the Conservative whip after a bizarre 3 a.m. phone call had him demanding thousands in campaign cash to free him from being locked up by, quote, bad people.
Bizarre. And should we be charging a fee to see GPs? Some say it's against the spirit of the NHS, while others say it will stop time wasting. We'll be having this debate in this hour, around 20 minutes. And we want your thoughts. Should we charge a nominal fee in order to see GPs? Will that stop time wasting? Your comments are very welcome. gbnews.com/your say. We'll be having that debate in just a little bit.
Does the NHS have a spirit? You said, is it in the spirit of the NHS?
I think there is a spirit of the NHS, which is sort of free at the point of use healthcare.
I don't know. I think the spirit of the NHS is to make sure that as many people have access to healthcare as possible. And if that means clearing the backlog by getting people to pay a little bit in order to see the GP, then people might be willing to do that. Better that than having a universal lack of healthcare.
It is what they have in France. You have to pay a sort of nominal little fee.
I don't think that's an argument that's going to sit well with the British public somehow. The French do it, so it must be a good idea.
Yeah, no, I think there's not much that the French do that we should copy wholesale, although 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear power, which is great.
That does sound like a good idea.
So they avoided much of the sort of winter cost pressure that we did when it comes to our energy. But the question is on the NHS, should we do this charging? Because some people say that actually that's too much organisation for GP surgeries. Implementing this system would be more time-wasting and costly than it's worth. That's another argument
It's interesting to see the Labour Party's comments on this, particularly Wes Streeting, because it seems as if the Labour Party actually seem to think they stand a better chance at privatising the NHS. So maybe those who don't want it privatised should stick with the Conservative Party.
Goodness me, what a topsy-turvy world we live in. Well, we're having that debate as well as getting all of the other latest news stories after your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you. The top stories this hour. Downing Street has refused to confirm if flights will get off the ground to Rwanda this spring in the wake of the latest blow to its flagship bill in the House of Lords last night. It's understood Number 10 will publish more detail about the timing of the first flights for asylum seekers once the bill has passed through Parliament. MPs will consider the Lords' amendments to the bill next week, but the government has indicated it will not be making any concessions.
Let's pass this Rwanda bill. Let's stop messing around, as Keir Starmer was telling his Lords to do last night, by chucking this out again. So the Commons is going to have to come back and vote on it. We've already voted for it. numerous times, and let's actually break this illegal chain of people being brought here.
Next to some breaking news from Scotland, where the bodies of 2 men have been recovered from a waterfall after what's believed to have been a tragic accident. Police Scotland have confirmed that the men aged 22 and 26 were pulled from the water at the Linn of Tummel waterfall in Perth and Kinross. Police and paramedics attended the scene and began searching the area last night. It is understood at this stage there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding the incident and investigations are ongoing. In other news, Labour are calling for police to investigate what opposition ministers have described as extraordinary allegations that an MP misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, Mr Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. Mark Menzies denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. He's also been suspended from his role as one of Rishi Sunak's trade envoys to South America. For now, he will sit as an independent in the House of Commons while the allegations are investigated. The prescription of puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones for children has been paused. It follows a landmark CAS review of gender services for under-18s, which revealed children had been let down by a lack of research and weak evidence on medical interventions. Ministers in Scotland have welcomed the move, but campaigners argue the decision is the wrong one. Like other parts of the UK, Scotland has seen a rapid rise in the number of young people questioning their identity or experiencing gender dysphoria. In England, the NHS has already stopped prescribing puberty blockers. It's been revealed that UK aid funding has been invested in an overseas firm that backs a social media site offering sexual services and promoting the Hamas attack on Israel. MPs are demanding answers from Lord Cameron and the Foreign Office following the findings in a report from the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. More than £6 million of funding went to the India Quotient Fund last year. The watchdog's warning the UK faces a major reputational risk because of those findings. A criminal gang involved in a website which taught subscribers how to defraud thousands of victims in the UK has been shut down by British police. 480,000 card numbers belonging to as many as 70,000 people were accessed via the website LabPost, with criminals subscribing to the site taught how to access bank details and PIN numbers. Since its creation, the site's received just under £1 million in subscriptions from criminal users. Detective Superintendent Helen Rance says many more arrests will be made in the coming weeks.
Within the UK, we've managed to identify 25,000 victims, and taking down an enabling service like this is absolutely what we need to do to tackle fraud. We need to get ahead and to dismantle an enabler such as LabPost.
Travel news now, and LNER train drivers have announced another strike on Saturday, leading to the cancellation of around 3 in 4 services. Members of ASLEF will walk out for the day and ban overtime over the weekend in a fresh dispute over terms and conditions. The rail operator says it'll run just 26% of its usual routes between London, Edinburgh and West Yorkshire, equivalent to around 40 services. The walkouts are separate to the long-running pay dispute between ASLEF and 16 train operators, including LNER. And Nellie the elephant said goodbye to the circus and decided to take a stroll. Residents in Butte, Montana in the United States had an unexpected visitor as Viola, an adventurous elephant, escaped a travelling circus. Caught on camera, Viola wandered through the streets before being gently guided away. And despite the drama, sparking both amusement and concern among locals, Viola returned home unharmed. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emma.
Good afternoon, Britain. Sorry, it's 8 minutes past 1.
A failed asylum seeker whose deportation flight was blocked has now pleaded guilty to raping a 15-year-old girl. Mr. Mayella's flight to the Republic of Congo was stopped by Air France cabin crew after claims deportation minders had taped his legs and handcuffed him. He subsequently claimed that his deportation was against his human rights and stayed in the UK.
Well, he became the poster boy against deportation flights of illegal migrants, posing with a sign saying, and we're really not making this up, migrants are not criminals. Of course, the news now is he's pleaded guilty to being a criminal. But this news comes as Number 10 has refused to confirm if flights to Rwanda will take off by the end of the spring. In fact, that new line is what Christopher Hope, our political editor, is here to tell us about. Christopher, you were talking with the Prime Minister's official spokesman a little bit earlier. How did that conversation go? This deadline keeps on slipping.
Yeah, some surprise, Mark, and hi, Emma. That's right, there's some surprise when, as reporters, we said just the usual question when the flight is taking off, expecting the PM spokesman to say the spring. He didn't say that. He said, we'll confirm the timing once this Safety of Rwanda bill has gone through the Houses of Parliament for both the Commons and the Lords. Now, we heard from Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House of Commons, earlier today. She says there's time set aside on Monday and Tuesday to push this through, but Number 10 is very clear. They said that they're aiming to get this through. The intention is to get this through on Monday. That suggests a late sitting of both Houses of Commons and Lords to push it through. At stake here are two amendments pushed back to the Commons by members of the House of Lords last night, tabled by Des Brown, Lord Brown, and David Hope, Lord Hope. One, the former Labour Defence Secretary, the latter is a former deputy head of the Supreme Court. Different areas. One about those who serve with UK forces in Afghanistan. Should they be taken to Rwanda if they come here illegally? And Lord Hope wanting to have regular checks on the safety of Rwanda. Both those we're being told will not be accepted by the government. So it will be a battle royal once again on Monday. What this means for the Safety of Rwanda bill is that the earliest it can get royal assent looks like Thursday next week. So they've lost a week of their time scale. They had always planned to get this royal assent through today, Thursday. It'll now be next Thursday. And that means this spring target for the first flight taking off is under threat. Spring, by the way, ends on June the 21st.
That's actually rather late, I think, for spring ending. Chris, what's the atmosphere like in Parliament at the moment? Is there a kind of, with all the news about the MP recently who's just lost the whip, Mark Menzies, this issue now with the Rwanda bill, the issues with the RAF base and the migrants being housed there. Is there a kind of apocalyptic feeling in the Conservative Party in Westminster at the moment? And is there even any hope that this actually will be sorted out on Monday?
Well, certainly if you look at the polls, Emma, it feels a bit apocalyptic for the Tory party. Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University, he gives the party 1% chance of winning a majority at the election, which I expect to be in November. Others are more generous. Joe Twyman has said maybe a 10% chance, even Delta Poll. He told me on that Choppers Politics podcast 2 weeks ago. It does feel as though it's the end of days. You see this issue today with Mark Menzies, the MP for Fylde. He's now had his whip suspended, and he's facing investigations by the Tory party. We hear in the Number 10 lobby briefing, he now no longer is the PM's envoy to, I'm just checking my notes here, Chile, Colombia, Peru and Argentina. That's a role which is now in abeyance while he's investigated. But there's a feeling, I think, that there's opportunity here for a party which does have a notional majority of 50 or 60 in the Commons, that it can't get things through. And what is puzzling, I think, Emma, is this whole Safety of Rwanda bill was emergency legislation when it was announced by Rishi Sunak in November last year. It's now mid-April and nothing has happened yet. And I think it does beg a belief to describe this as any kind of emergency. We are told it's important for the government to get it through, but the MPs and peers are just back from a month-long holiday.
No, it is remarkable to sort of sense that perhaps, Chris, I know you were a journalist. You've been a journalist for a lot longer than I have. And in the 1990s, when things were sort of falling apart around John Major, you had all of these sort of stories of sleaze by-elections. John Major actually lost his majority by the end of that parliament in 1997. Does it feel the same to you?
It does feel a bit as though things keep happening to this government and this party, and there's almost a pattern emerging. Yes, as you say, with the Mark Menzies issue this week, William Ragg last week, it just carries on. There's always, and it's about personal behaviour. Of course, it's denied in the case of Mark Menzies and others. But yes, there's a feeling that the party is under assault from the fates, and almost anything they can try and get right, no one's listening properly. I thought the figures last week on the trade were very interesting. We're now the fourth biggest trader in the world, up from seventh. That's a big win for Brexit Britain, you could argue, but few noticed outside those who pay attention to Brexit news, maybe. And I think that he's doing his best, the PM. He's not helping himself, maybe, with this cigarettes ban. That was what annoyed the right this week, although he did stand up very strongly, didn't he, for Nigel Farage, Suella Braverman and Miriam Cates when they were nearly silenced in Brussels by that left-wing mayor. So he's doing his best, Rishi Sunak, but no one's listening yet, and they're trying to change the weather. The sun is out in Westminster. It's not out yet for the Tory party.
No, it is remarkable. This week we've seen inflation in the UK drop below the level of inflation in the United States. I suppose if you were to ask the average Brit, they would say, no, it's not.
Rishi Sunak's best is not good enough.
No, they're just not giving him the time. But Chris Hope, thanks very much for talking us through all of that. Really appreciate it. Really dark times in Westminster, despite the sun. But it's not just Westminster and that government that's reeling from U-turns, because the Scottish government has ditched its goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030.
The Climate Change Committee had already warned Scotland that the 2030 target was unachievable and said the country had lost its UK lead in combating climate change.
Well, Scotland's final goal, reaching net zero by 2045, curiously remains. But environmental campaigners are still branding the government's plans as a global embarrassment, raising question marks over that 2045 goal too. Shall we speak to one of those climate campaigners? The director of Climate Media Coalition, Donncha McCarthy, joins us now. Donncha, thank you so much for making the time. You must be very disappointed in Hamza Yousaf over this.
Well, it is disappointing, but it is basically the reality of what the Climate Change Committee said last month in its report. Scotland has reduced its carbon emissions by 50%. Its economy has expanded during that time, but now the progress has stalled. The key areas of electricity has been extraordinary. Scotland now producing 113% of its energy of its electricity from renewable resources. It's a net exporter of green electricity, which is astonishing. However, in areas like heating, agriculture, transport, they're the stubborn ones that are not moving, and the government has not been taking the actions necessary.
Are the SNP waking up, do you think, to the reality of what net zero actually means and what it would take to actually achieve net zero? And is this something that, generally speaking, the public in Scotland are happy with, or are they more pro green energy, more pro net zero than perhaps the rest of the UK?
Well, the public, both in Scotland and in the rest of the country, are way ahead of both the Scottish government and the British government on action on climate change. Very large majorities favour more action on it. And looking at, when you're talking about the reality of net zero, yes, the reality is terrifying. If you look at the moment of the impacts on agriculture in Britain and across Europe, we're looking at food inflation directly linked to extreme weather, which is the most worrying one from my perspective. You do not have a stable economy if you've got rampant food inflation, and that's the real threat of net zero if we don't act.
Is it irresponsible to be striving after net zero at a time when we actually have problems with food shortages and inflation?
Sorry, I just said we've got rampant food inflation linked with extreme weather, linked to climate change, and you respond to me saying, is it irresponsible to act on net zero? I don't understand your question.
I mean, is it irresponsible if there are effects on farming of trying to achieve net zero? We've seen protests across the world, particularly in the Netherlands. Do you think that it's therefore irresponsible actually to be taking actions that will affect farming, that will lead to further food inflation?
Sorry, what's leading food inflation is extreme weather caused by climate change. The farms in England that have been underwater for 6 months. 6 months underwater from extreme weather. That's what's causing inflation, not action on climate change. The real issue with agriculture, interesting in Scotland, is land use emissions have gone down because they stopped chopping down trees. But what the Climate Change Commission is saying is that they're not restoring the wetlands and the lost woodlands fast enough to take account of, to start restoring the carbon emissions that we've released. And Scotland is absolutely blessed in natural resources to do that. Massive amounts of woodland
is the
to be
problem
restored.
here that Humza Yousaf has run into is that they've done the easy bit. Frankly, they've built lots of wind turbines. They've got the electricity grid basically there. Everything else is a lot harder. And so whilst the UK government can crow about its reduction in emissions, and it has been impressive, more impressive than most countries around the world, both in England and in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland for that matter. But perhaps we've had the easy bit, and it's only going to get harder as the more difficult bits to decarbonise come on stream.
That's a fair question, a fair point. The electricity, getting rid of coal was because coal was so huge in terms of emissions. And it's been a huge success story, both for the British government and the Scottish government, that we have decarbonised and got rid of coal so fast. The real problem now is what do we do with the car culture? What do we do with our leaky ancient housing stock? And what do we do with the addiction of the British public to holiday abroad? Basically, 50% of the population thinks it's their human right to holiday abroad. If they could use the patriotic thing and holiday in Britain, strengthen the British economy and cut their carbon emissions, that's a win-win. I think, and I see you smiling, we should do the patriotic thing and a holiday in Britain.
No, you should do the patriotic thing and holiday in the Commonwealth. Tonica, thank you. That's all we have time for. Really appreciate you coming on and talking through that big issue, that enormous U-turn there from the SNP.
Thank you.
But coming up, should we be paying to see our GP? We're going to be debating that latest suggestion. A surprising percentage of Brits actually back the measure. Could it cut waiting times? That debate after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Squatters in London have taken over a pub which is leased by Gordon Ramsay, no less. The pub is currently up for sale with a guide price of £30 million. It is understood that Kitchen Nightmares host Ramsay called the police on Wednesday but was unable to have the squatters removed. The Metropolitan Police said in a statement they were made aware of squatters at a disused property but added, this is a civil matter and so police did not attend the property. Let's see what my panel make of this. Why can't we just boot squatters out? If we own a property or lease a property, why don't we just boot them out?
I know that's tempting, but the fact is, long-term empty properties have increased by 24% in the last 6 years. There's 1.2 million people on the social housing lists. People don't have a place to live.
What it does highlight is the enormous disparity in fairness in property laws in this country. It's just not fair that if you've worked all your life and invested some money in property because, you know, interest rates at zero and there's nowhere else to invest your money, and then suddenly somebody who's got no claim to that property and doesn't seem to have earned very much in life takes over your property. It's an outrage.
People shouldn't be squatting in other people's homes or commercial properties. But the fact is, until we sort the housing problem in this country, none of this is going to go away. The fact is, people my age won't be able to buy a home unless they've got a bung from their parents.
Yeah, but what's the practicality of this demonstration?
It's not a demonstration.
It's not going to free up more housing for people who are on the streets.
No, of course not.
Is it?
It's people looking to find a place to live. I don't think it's a demonstration at all.
It's an anti-wealth, anti-property-owning demonstration by people who've got nothing better to do in life than break into other people's property.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 1. Now, almost half of us would be willing to pay for better NHS services. That's according to a recent poll. Around 40% say they'd be open to paying extra to have operations more quickly and get routine opticians checkups, as well as mental health appointments.
With 9 in 10 respondents saying that the health service needs reform, is it time to start paying for NHS appointments? What do you think, Tom?
Well, they do this in France. And it is not...
Again,
of course, it's not...
They do it in France. It's not an argument, Tom.
That's true, that's true. I might as well say, you know, they do it in North Korea. It doesn't mean it's good. But I think the point here is that there are countries that sort of have almost a tokenistic payment, not covering the entire cost of that. You're not asking people to sort of, you know, stump up all of those healthcare bills like people without insurance have to do in the United States. Instead, having a sort of little tokenistic barrier just to stop the time wasting, to stop people who go in to see a GP just to have a chat or because they don't really need to.
And maybe those who earn under a certain income could be exempted from having to
Yeah, there are lots of
fee.
ways that you could implement it. But interestingly, this is what Rishi Sunak proposed when he stood to be Prime Minister back in the summer of 2022. But joining us to debate this now is the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reed, who says we should not be paying for these appointments, but also political commentator Russell Quirk, who believes it should be a service with payments, with shortcuts to better services for those willing to pay. Well, goodness me, Russell, you're the one who wants to change things. You go first.
I do. Look, we've talked long and for a long, long time about innovating in the NHS. In fact, even Labour's Wes Streeting talks a lot about innovating in the NHS. I think what we can't do in terms of improving it, and I don't think there's many people that believe that it doesn't need to be improved. What we can't keep doing is more of the same and also just sitting there with our hands out, or the NHS rather, sitting there with their hands out, expecting more and more money to be thrown at the NHS as if that alone is going to solve the NHS's problems. What we need to see is some change, some innovation. And I think if you end up with, dare I say, and I'm sure this will be thrown back at me in a second, a 2-tier NHS, I think that is not only innovative, but it seems entirely sensible and practical for a couple of reasons. One, because it would effectively ensure that those that take the basic level of NHS services would actually have more resource, because obviously there would be other people that are taking, if you like, premium services. But the second reason, of course, Tom, is that there would be money provided by that premium service that then, of course, would go on recruiting more doctors, more radiologists, more nurses and more equipment, which surely is exactly what the left have been crying out for decades.
But Rebecca, wouldn't people just be effectively paying twice?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange to hear people saying, should we be paying for our GP appointments? We do pay for them. They're free at points of usage, but a very significant amount of your tax pays for it. And I agree that NHS reform is important, but I think we should all be equally against a system where you can have better healthcare if you earn more money. And also, I find it confusing to hear about this mooted as a new idea. If you want to pay to see a GP, you can. Like, over the Easter weekend, my daughter has asthma. I wanted to get an inhaler done. I didn't want to wait in A&E. I had the ability to pay £68 to go and see a GP very near my house immediately on the dot like that. This exists already. If you want to pay for it, you can pay for it. So the suggestion that it's to improve people's access is disingenuous. What people are really talking about is wanting to find ways to free up more money. And what I find really, really egregious is the idea that somebody would think, oh, is my child quite ill enough for me to stump up 75 quid to see a GP, and maybe decide not to take their child because they don't have that in the budget. That just isn't right.
Let's throw that right back to Russell.
Well, look, one of the other problems with the NHS is, I'm afraid, because it is free of charge, there is no accountability within that organisation. There's also no accountability on the basis of there being no consequences for the public that uses it, which is why, on the very rare occasion that I go into my doctor's surgery locally in Brentwood, I sit there on a Thursday afternoon watching the clock ticking in terms of the amount of people that haven't shown up for their appointments. So the last time I did that, I think on a Thursday morning, 85 people that week hadn't turned up. Now, if you were to charge people a nominal amount, that level of consequence and accountability would then eradicate that problem and actually ensure that waiting lists, literally at a stroke of a pen, at a stroke of a new policy being introduced, as I'm suggesting, would actually shorten the time that it takes to get to the GP. So, you know, I say again, what we can't be doing throughout this what is now going to be an election campaign over the coming weeks and months is simply to talk about there having to be more money for the NHS. I tell you, if we were all taxed more and the money went directly into the NHS, it would not improve, because the problem is not one of funding, it is one of efficiency and lack of innovation and lack of good organisation.
So are you suggesting that charging for GP appointments wouldn't put more money into the NHS? So you're saying on one hand, the NHS doesn't need more money, but also we should charge people for appointments. How do those two things tally?
So because money becomes an incentive, or rather a disincentive. So in that respect, it's not necessarily about the money. It's the fact that it would create shorter waiting lists for GPs. I'd also go further, frankly. You won't like this very much. I would say that if you want to jump the waiting list for an operation, you should be able to pay for that privilege too.
You can. You go private.
Let me
but within the NHS.
Let me
Why
put
not
this
within the
to
NHS?
Let me put this to Rebecca quickly. So you say that you paid £60 odd, and it is possible for people to go and pay for a GP's appointment. There are many people who wouldn't be able to do that, and the suggestion is that the fee would be much, much lower. If that were to help clear the NHS backlog, stop time wasters from using up NHS resources, would that not be something that you would be in favour for if it were to actually help people have better access to the NHS rather than what we have now, which is almost a universal lack of healthcare?
But I think it's the freedom of choice thing that's great, right? If you have the ability to pay, then I think you should take it upon yourself to do so. I think that's a very responsible thing to do. But making it so that people don't have that choice, you know, people's income fluctuates. I might be able to afford something this month that I can't next month. So having that freedom of accessibility is really, really important. But the idea, again, that your access to healthcare should depend on your budget per month doesn't make sense, especially if you were already paying into this. And what you then get into is people saying, well, hang on, I'm paying for all my private healthcare. Why am I paying the same taxes to the NHS? And then you get into a two-tier tax system, and that becomes a disaster.
Russell, people shouldn't pay twice, surely?
I think if they want to and are willing to, and it alleviates pressure on resource and allows that person the freedom of choice, as Rebecca's actually just setting out my argument entirely, then what is wrong with that? It is a matter of freedom of choice. But again, otherwise, all I'm hearing from Rebecca, respectfully, is an ideological argument. You know, it's not right that we shouldn't this or we shouldn't that. I'm more about pragmatism and practicality and ensuring that by way of innovating and also helping to better organise the NHS, this actually, in terms of charging for GP appointments and also for other services within the NHS, would create two solutions: more money and actually free up resources. It's a win-win, surely.
It didn't need more money. You said a couple of minutes ago the NHS doesn't need more money. So how? And then you're saying they do need.
Well, no,
money.
because I'm saying, but Rebecca, I'm throwing your own argument on the left, and forgive me for labelling you as the left, but I'm pretty certain that you are. That all we hear from the left is that there needs to be more money, and it should come from the rich. What I'm suggesting is that the rich, so-called, the middle classes, pay directly without that money actually having to go through the indignity of going through the tax system and then back out again. It's a perfect scenario. Look, the politics of envy, though, I'm afraid, Rebecca, the politics of envy doesn't allow this system to work. Because, of course, those that say they can't afford it don't want others that have worked hard that can to have better circumstances, it seems.
Okay, well, working hard and having disposable income are not necessarily the same thing. Lots of people on very low incomes work very hard. It's not the politics of envy. I am somebody who is a homeowner of a 3-bedroom house in London who uses a private GP. I'm not envious of anything. I am, however, responsible, and I see other people struggling, and I worry about those people. So being socially conscious isn't being envious. Many of us on the left myself included, if I could just finish, very much agree that the NHS needs reform. It is not run efficiently. We are all in agreement that the NHS is not run efficiently. The pay structures don't necessarily work. The trust system doesn't necessarily work. Reform from the inside, absolutely, but don't take away the ability to see a GP at free point of access because people will die.
Well, there we go. Russell, we started with you. Rebecca, we finished with you. Fair's fair. We've run to the end of the debate. Thank you very much for participating. I think we had some really interesting stuff on both sides there. I'd just like to bring in a viewer comment from Nick, who says that in France, people pay €26 to see the doctor. It's going up to €30 very shortly. And it actually makes the system work. That's what Nick says. But gbnews.com/yoursay is how you get involved in this debate. Up next, 70,000 people have been victims of a huge online fraud operation. We'll have the very latest on the police's investigation there after your headlines.
Tom, thank you. 1:33. These are your top stories this hour from the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says the Rwanda scheme is a gimmick, and he's calling it a waste of taxpayers' money in the wake of the latest blow to the government's flagship bill in the House of Lords last night. The Labour leader's comments come as Downing Street declined to recommit to the Prime Minister's spring deadline to get deportation flights off the ground. It's understood Number 10 will publish more detail about the timing of the first flights to Rwanda once the asylum legislation has passed through Parliament. MPs will consider the Lords' amendments to the bill next week, but the government has indicated it will not be making any concessions. In other news, Labour are calling for police to investigate what opposition ministers have described as extraordinary allegations that an MP misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, Mark Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who he says locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. He denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. He's also been suspended from his role as one of Rishi Sunak's trade envoys to South America. For now, he'll sit as an independent in the House of Commons while the allegations are investigated. Next, to some breaking news from Woolwich Crown Court, where a man has been sentenced to 4 years in prison for a hoax terrorism campaign targeting primary schools, airports and shopping centres. In 2013, Gary Preston sent 42 envelopes containing white powder and threatening letters that caused panic and evacuations at various locations nationwide over a 6-week period. Those envelopes contained talcum powder and threatening letters with Arabic texts. One envelope led to the evacuation of a 300-room hotel. The 64-year-old was arrested after more than 10 years and pleaded guilty to 21 charges. Prosecutors say today's ruling is a positive outcome and Preston will now spend a significant time behind bars. In Scotland, the prescription of puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones for children has been paused. It follows a landmark CAS review of gender services for under-18s, which revealed children had been let down by a lack of research and weak evidence on medical interventions. Ministers in Scotland have welcomed the move, but campaigners argue the decision is the wrong one. Like other parts of the UK, Scotland has seen a rapid rise in the number of young people questioning their identity or experiencing gender dysphoria. In England, the NHS has already stopped prescribing puberty blockers. And travel news, the LNER train drivers have announced another strike on Saturday, leading to the cancellation of around 3 in 4 services. Members of ASLEF will walk out for the day and ban overtime over the weekend in a fresh dispute over terms and conditions. The rail operator says it'll run just 26% of its usual routes between London, Edinburgh and West Yorkshire, equivalent to around 40 services. The walkouts are separate to the long-running pay dispute between ASLEF and 16 train operators, including LNER. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2479 and €1.1688. The price of gold is £1,907.68 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,860 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands, Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight, much of the southwest staying dry. The winds noticed coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start, cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too. There's some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon, but the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to East Ayrshire in Scotland. Firstly, the A713 currently closed between the Bankfield roundabout in Ayr and Hollybush delays at the scene of an accident. There's one as well in the Milnthorpe area of Wakefield in West Yorkshire. The Asdale Road, the A60-186 is shut between the supermarket and the turn-off for Denby Dale Road, causing delays. Still queuing for the eastbound M56-14 towards Runcorn at 12, and earlier resurfacing repairs have been completed, but still seeing some delays. All lanes back open though. Northbound M23 queuing for 2 miles, Gatwick Airport at 9, up towards the M25 junction 8, 3 lanes shut at the scene of a collision. And on the ferries, the FDS delays are up to an hour at the moment, and that's between Dover and Dunkirk. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 20 to 2. Now, dozens of suspected cyber fraudsters have been arrested across the UK after authorities brought down an illegal website used by thousands of criminals to defraud victims across the world.
Police have identified at least 70,000 victims in the UK alone as sophisticated online enablers trained to train criminals to set up fake websites to scam victims into handing over personal details. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this special report.
Across the UK, dozens of suspected cybercriminals.
Well, it looks like that report was going at about half speed. Something that certainly never goes at half speed is Mark White himself. We can speak to Mark now. We're going to see if we can get the tech on that programme working. Perhaps these scammers have been attacking our systems.
Yeah, I'm normally on about quarter speed, I think.
Well, Mark, what is the story here?
Well, it's a worrying new development in terms of the way in which cyber criminals who have got a degree of expertise in setting up these fake websites are passing on that knowledge now to those criminals who might be minded to make easy money through the likes of these phishing scams, but just don't have the technical know-how to do this. Now, I would be classed, I think, quite comfortably as a Luddite. But when I attended that police briefing and listened in on the tutorials that were part of this package that criminals would enrol in, they would see the website, they would click on this course, and you know, it was a woman that was a voiceover from a woman giving instructions on how they work their browser to put on these fake websites, and even I would be able to follow it. But now, as you can see from the vision there, multiple people, up to 40 individuals in the UK and around the world, being rounded up by authorities after this investigation of more than 2 years that was able to infiltrate this website, LabHost it's called, and bring it down. And the authorities have now actually put up a banner heading on that site saying it has been taken down by authorities. They're putting out trolling messages as well to those criminals that have enrolled on this course, saying we know who you are and we're coming after you. But 2,000 criminals had enrolled on this website, paying a subscription of about £200 to £300. The website criminal masterminds behind this have made more than £1 million through this scam. And of course, those they train have then gone on to scam many thousands of victims, and of course, during that have actually raised hundreds of millions of pounds in illegal profits.
It's a hugely concerning development. Mark White, thank you for bringing that to us, and good to see that there have been quite so many arrests, actually. Police doing their job. But next up, we're going to be talking to a Conservative MP who's hugely concerned about what's going on in Scotland. Children are being appointed as LGBT champions in primary schools. That's asking children as young as 4 to say if they're gay, lesbian or even transgender. Miriam Cates will be with us after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Offline and overlooked. That's what Age UK say millions of British pensioners are. Why? Because they cannot or won't access the internet. It's leading to digital exclusion. So the charities campaigning for public services like banks, utilities and even the NHS to maintain a more human approach.
Everything's online. People assume you've got a smartphone with a mobile number and an email, and without that you don't exist in this world anymore. We've got to try and get the government to see that it's so important to make people feel that they belong, because there's a feeling that the older generation just feel that they're forgotten, they're in the way. And we already know that anyway, but it's just another reason for them to feel that they're not wanted. They'll just accept it and they'll say, well, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And that's it, whereas other people would be really kicking and screaming. So we need to be the voice for older people.
Despite digital technology playing an increasing role in our lives, around 1 in 5 over 65s in the UK don't use the internet. Thornycroft Centre in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, provides a space for this age group to socialise and get help to go online.
I'm not that good with mobiles, so when you mention anything about online, I ain't a clue what you're talking about.
The closure of thousands of banks is also detrimental to the older generation.
A lot of our members what come, they tend to use cash. They don't like to use bank cards. I think a lot of it's trust or the lack of knowledge. They don't understand how it works. I think they're very vulnerable as well with online. It's really important that they're aware how to use it and how to use it safely.
So, in an online era, it's still crucial for many to have an offline option.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 47 minutes past 1. Now, some Scottish primary schools are appointing children as LGBT champions. They're being urged to ask pupils as young as 4 if they're gay, lesbian or transgender.
Documents suggest that schools have been setting up LGBT clubs as part of their membership of a scheme run by a charity called LGBT Youth Scotland.
Well, the charity reportedly received £1 million of taxpayers' money last year and also urges head teachers to mark Transgender Day of Remembrance, as well as installing gender-neutral loos. But let's speak with the Conservative MP Miriam Cates, who's very vocal on childcare issues and child safety, because, Miriam, I think everyone can see that a level of LGBT education is a good thing in schools. Some people have 2 dads, some people have 2 mums. That's OK. This is something very, very different. This is going well beyond that.
It is, and it appears as though children are being recruited to an adult political cause, and of course that's exactly what we've seen exposed through the Cass review in the last week, and that's received an enormous amount of attention. Adults with a particular ideology pushing that ideology on children with very damaging effects. But I think the next thing that has to happen is not only to recognise what's gone wrong in the NHS, but also that this is happening in schools, and this is a really, really concerning example, because of course these are primary school children. These are children who've not been through puberty. They don't have sexual feelings. So asking them if they're straight or gay is not only ridiculous, it's actually quite disturbing, because why would an adult in a school be asking a small child about their sexual feelings? This is very, very worrying. But it's being dressed up to look as though it's a diversity agenda, it's an inclusivity agenda. But actually, if we think about what's happening here, it goes against all safeguarding principles, and we've got to call it out.
Off the back of the Cass report, Miriam, you mentioned safeguarding there. Given that this organisation is receiving so much taxpayer money, is the Scottish Government morally complicit in those safeguarding issues within those primary schools? And in addition to that, obviously the Cass report is looking specifically at transgender issues, but one of the activities that these schools have been doing is having a coming out day, which could effectively pressure children as young as 4 into revealing that they are same-sex oriented, which, as you say, children that young don't know their feelings. It seems like a very strange thing. So do you think the Scottish Government have something to answer to here in being morally culpable?
The Scottish Government certainly need to look at this carefully, and whether or not this charity is appropriate to receive taxpayer funding. But of course, we know over the last 10 years, a number of very radical political charities have, across the UK, have received taxpayer money. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the reason why so many of our institutions have become captured by some of these ideologies. So the Scottish Government certainly needs to look at it, but it's not, of course, the only institution that's at fault here. But I think the Cass review is a real watermark, a watershed moment in this ideology, because it has been revealed as a kind of emperor's new clothes story, where lots of people could see what was going on, that these were not children who needed medication. These were children who needed help. And yet they were pushed into a particular ideology for adult political reasons. But that is happening in schools too, as this charity is demonstrating. But on one hand, we could say it's just absurd to talk to a 4-year-old like this, but it's actually more more sinister than that, because, you know, we understand, teachers understand, safeguarding experts understand that adults do not talk to children about sexual feelings. Normally, we would call that grooming. Even with adolescents who obviously do have sexual feelings, it's not appropriate for a teacher, for a counsellor in school to ask a child directly about those feelings. That is crossing important boundaries. And it seems that this charity has set itself up in order to cross those important boundaries. And so there should be a safeguarding investigation into the operations of that charity.
No, it's a strong call you make there, but I suppose there is a distinction there between primary schools and secondary schools. We do expect a level of sexual education in secondary schools to show children best practice to stop abuse.
There is a difference, though, between education and intrusion. Of course, it's important to teach children facts and to educate them, but asking them individually as people, as human beings, about private sexual feelings is not appropriate in a school. It's not appropriate for an adult to speak to a child like that, whether it's one-to-one or in a classroom, to ask them about their sexual feelings. Of course, there's a difference between educating children, but to ask them those personal questions is not appropriate.
Now, we're running out of time, so I do want to quickly get a word on your former colleague now, Mark Menzies. Lost the Conservative whip today. Frankly, shouldn't he have lost it a long, long time ago?
I don't know anything about the story other than what I have glanced at in the Telegraph between meetings today. So I just don't feel qualified to comment on it, I'm afraid.
I suppose you've shared tea rooms with Mark Menzies. You've been in the same party as him for years. This isn't the first scandal he's got himself into.
As I said, the only thing I know is what I have glanced at in the Telegraph. I got a train from St Pancras at 7 a.m. I got into Sheffield at 9. I've been at a constituency meeting till an hour ago and then catching up on email. So, as I said, I mean, from what I've seen in the Telegraph, it looks absolutely dreadful, but I can't comment reliably because all I've done is read that article. Fair
enough. Well, Miriam Cates, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you'll understand. Big story there, losing yet another colleague in a series of Conservative sleaze stories that we seem to be getting week after week at the moment. Miriam Cates there. Well, I mean, this has been perhaps something that is of a backdrop to which we're used now, and it does have all these hallmarks of what was going on in the late John Major era of government, the sleaze stories.
Yeah, I think people are probably feeling quite exhausted, actually, by all of this sort of almost Westminster bubble, scandal after scandal after scandal on both sides of the House. I think people will be, wondering what exactly is the ethical calibre of the people who are representing them in Parliament.
Yeah, it's worth remembering there's still a number of former Labour MPs suspended without the whip with no explanations. But we're going to be on to asylum seekers in Wethersfield after the break. Apparently there have been some serious safety risks. We'll give you the details after this.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands, Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight, much of the southwest staying dry. The winds noticed coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start, cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too. There's some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon, but the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
that warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 18th of April.
Tory Slee's long-standing MP Mark Menzies is stripped of the Conservative whip after a bizarre 3 a.m. phone call that had him demanding thousands in campaign cash to free him from being locked up by bad people.
Very weird. Fishing for criminals. Dozens of suspected cyber fraudsters have been arrested as law enforcement takedown of an illegal website used to defraud around 70,000 victims in the UK.
Reborn in the USA, Prince Harry declares his official country of residence as the United States of America. Fresh document filings reveal. Has the prince given up Blighty for good? I sure hope so.
But the same can't be said for Prince William, who's very much still with us here in the UK, carrying out his first public engagement since his wife Catherine's cancer diagnosis. We'll have all the latest of his latest visit. What a contrast. What a contrast. The day we learn Prince Harry is given up on the UK, declared residency in the United States, is also the day that Prince William gets back out there quietly, diligently, getting on with his job.
You know, I'm going to call it. I don't think that he really is going to give up the UK
you think
quite
Harry will
so
come
readily.
Back?
I think he's done. I mean, he backdated the date of in this filing to the date when he was evicted from Frogmore Cottage. So obviously, everything Harry does has some kind of symbolic weight relating to his victimisation. He's feeling hurt at the decision of the king to evict him from that cottage that was given to them by the Queen when they first got married. I don't think that he's going anywhere. It does seem that he's had to back out of this recent court case, or possibly because of the just sheer amount of money that he would have to spend on pursuing that, and so may settle out of court as a result. So I don't think that this is going to be, unfortunately, the last we see of Prince Harry.
No, but it is interesting. It's this sort of duality. It's this Schrodinger's Prince Harry, right? One,
that's a clunky statement.
I think this might be the first time anyone's ever said it. I don't know, but at once he wants to be private and quiet and away from the eye of the evil media.
And then they set up a lifestyle brand and
a Netflix
media
series
company.
and a podcast and a worldwide privacy tour. But we're going to be getting to the royals and indeed some stories a little bit closer to home as well after your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. Sir Keir Starmer says the Rwanda scheme is a gimmick and a waste of taxpayers' money in the wake of the latest blow to the government's flagship bill in the House of Lords last night. The Labour leader's comments come as Downing Street declined to recommit to the Prime Minister's spring deadline to get deportation flights off the ground. It's understood Number 10 will publish more detail about the timing of the first flights to Rwanda once the asylum legislation has passed through Parliament. MPs will consider the Lords' amendments to the bill next week, but the government has indicated it will not be making any concessions. Labour are calling for police to investigate what opposition ministers have described as extraordinary allegations that an MP misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, Mark Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who he says locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. He denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. For now, he'll sit as an independent while the allegations are investigated. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says, though, it's taken too long for the government to act.
I'll be honest, there's a degree of frustration as well. We're 2 weeks away from really important local and mayoral elections when, there's a lot of positive arguments that we want to make about the change we can bring about in these elections. And yet again, we're talking about misbehaviour by Tory MPs. And if ever you needed evidence of why we need to turn the page on this shower and have a fresh start with Labour, I think it's in these allegations that are coming out today.
In Scotland, the prescription of puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones for children has been paused. It follows a landmark Cath review of gender services for under-18s, which revealed children had been let down by a lack of research and weak evidence on medical interventions. Ministers in Scotland have welcomed the move, but campaigners argue the decision is the wrong one. Like other parts of the UK, Scotland has seen a rapid rise in the number of young people questioning their identity or experiencing gender dysphoria. In England, the NHS has already stopped prescribing puberty blockers. It's been revealed that UK aid funding has been invested in an overseas firm that backs a social media site offering sexual services and promoting the Hamas attack on Israel. MPs are demanding answers from Lord Cameron and the Foreign Office following the findings in a report from the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. More than £6 million of funding went to the India Quotient Fund last year. The watchdog's warning the UK faces a major reputational risk because of those findings. A man has been sentenced to 4 years in prison for a hoax terrorism campaign targeting primary schools, airports and shopping centres. In 2013, Gary Preston sent 42 envelopes containing white powder and threatening letters that caused panic and evacuations at various locations nationwide over a 6-week period. The envelopes contained talcum powder and threatening letters with Arabic texts. One envelope led to the evacuation of a 300-room hotel. The 64-year-old was arrested after more than 10 years, pleaded guilty to 21 charges. A criminal gang involved in a website which taught subscribers how to defraud thousands of victims in the UK has been shut down by British police. 480,000 card numbers belonging to as many as 70,000 people were accessed via the website LabPost, with criminals subscribing to the site taught how to access bank details and PIN numbers. Detective Superintendent Helen Rance says many more arrests will be made in the coming weeks.
Within the UK, we've managed to identify 25,000 victims, and taking down an enabling service like this is absolutely what we need to do to tackle fraud. We need to get ahead and to dismantle an enabler such as LabHost.
New data suggests almost 1 million private renters in England have been handed a no-fault eviction in the 5 years since the government promised to ban them. YouGov research suggests it's costing £550 million a year in unwanted moves. If other upfront costs, including rent paid in advance and deposits, are factored in, that total rises to £1.2 billion, according to the findings. But the Conservatives insist Section 21 notices will be banned for the new tenancies by the general election. LNER train drivers have announced another strike on Saturday, leading to the cancellation of around 3 and 4 services. Members of ASLEF will walk out for the day and ban overtime for the weekend in a fresh dispute over terms and conditions. The rail operator says it'll run just 26% of its usual routes between London, Edinburgh and West Yorkshire, equivalent to around 40 services. And these walkouts are separate to the long-running pay dispute between ASLEF and 16 train operators, including LNER. And some royal news. The Prince of Wales has returned to public duties for the first time since Kate's announcement that she's being treated for cancer. William's been meeting volunteers at a food distribution charity in Surrey. As well as lending a hand in the kitchen, he was also presented with Get Well Soon cards for his wife. The Prince's last official engagement was a month ago. He's now travelling to West London to meet young people who benefit from the organisation's deliveries. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's over to Tom and Emma.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, the Home Office has been forced to move asylum seekers out of an ex-RAF base in Essex after safety concerns were identified on the site. These include radiological contamination and unexploded ordnance.
It's another setback for the Home Office and their attempts to reduce the number of hotels being used as temporary accommodation, which has seen growing protests from local residents.
I'm a little bit sceptical about how genuine these concerns are, but our man on the ground, who somehow managed to survive all of the radioactive substances that are clearly around him, is Ray Addison. Ray, how are you holding up?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, but must be very stressful for the people inside, the asylum seekers inside. I mean, just think of the situation. You've made your way through several countries, very dangerous journey. You've got yourself to the United Kingdom. You've been placed here, you're waiting for your asylum claim to be processed, and then you find out that this site has serious safety risks, could have radiation, and might even have unexploded ordnance. And that's what we're being told today. Of course, 10 months ago, when everybody moved in here for the very first time, much against the wishes of the local residents, by the way, the Home Office said that this site was safe and fit for purpose. And now we find out that this U-turn's taking place, or sort of a partial U-turn, because 70 of the residents here have finally been moved back out and back into those expensive hotels that the Prime Minister is so keen to stop using. Now, this site is one of the Home Office's largest accommodation facilities. It could have up to 800 people. We hear, local residents here, that there's just under 600. And last month they got planning permission to use this facility for these asylum seekers for another 3 years. And that came under a special development order. And what that meant was that they were able to circumvent the local council planning applications and things like that. By the way, the local council not too keen on this facility being used for a variety of reasons as well. Now, in that special development order, there were concerns raised about contamination here at this site, and it appears that those concerns have now been realised. Now, there's been buses coming and going, taking asylum seekers off to the local towns and villages through the day, but just earlier on at the start of the day, 2 men walked out on foot, and so I grabbed a quick word with them as best I could. We'll have a quick chat? No? Are you guys worried about the contamination on the site? Where are you off to?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Walking.
Oh, what job do you have?
They were saying something about working then, which of course is not legal for asylum seekers to do as things stand. Really curious.
It sounds beautiful there, Ray. You can hear the birds tweeting. Was this site used previously for military personnel? I mean, we've seen a similar story at RAF Scrampton in Lincolnshire with a similar concern about contamination. If this is inhospitable for refugees, surely this would also be a problem for military personnel, wouldn't it?
Yes, it's definitely been used. It's a former RAF base. It's definitely been used, historically for a variety of uses, I think for both UK and American forces, I've been told. However, I won't pretend to be an expert in the military history of this site. But I hear what you're saying, that question there, well, why have we got a problem now if we didn't have a problem before? And I think perhaps one of the reasons is a lot of the buildings in here would be sort of prefab buildings. They will have been moved around. As I've seen people coming and going, this is a very busy site. I'm in the middle of nowhere, essentially, on a very quiet country lane, but there's all manner of deliveries, handymen, builders, UPS, not to mention the deliveries of the men coming back and forth from their day trips as well. This is very, very busy. And so a lot of work is going on in here. I've heard anecdotal evidence from residents that they had to dig and widen the drainage system for the wastewater to go out of the base here because it wasn't used to that many people. And so a lot of work is going on here. And so if there have been things buried or left and covered over through no malicious intent, just because of the passage of time, then there is a risk that there are potentially dangerous items here in the camp.
It is just a little bit fishy, isn't it? That we get a boat, we get the BBC Stockholm, a barge. Suddenly, there's all sorts of problems with it. All the doors are the wrong thing for fire safety, all the rest of it. Scampton, you have similar problems. Wethersfield, you just find problems. It's almost as if people are trying to find problems in this game of whack-a-mole.
It does make you wonder whether the bar is just set a lot higher for these asylum seekers than it is for the rest of the UK population.
Well, certainly for the military figures who had been stationed there in years past. Ray Edison, thank you very much for giving us all of that and indeed for braving all of that radioactivity. I have to say, I used to I grew up in Cambridgeshire where a lot of radioactive stuff was developed during the war, and I distinctly remember being told as I was going on a bike ride that one of the fields to my side was sort of where lots of experiments were done. It didn't do me any. Maybe it did do me a lot, Tom. Maybe it did. But in response, the Home Office has had this to say. We've always been clear that the use of asylum hotels is unacceptable, which is why we moved asylum seekers to former military sites, which we ensure are safe to accommodate asylum seekers prior to use. Well, let's hope they have ensured that it's safe.
Downing Street has refused to recommit to Rishi Sunak's spring deadline to the deportation flights off the ground to Rwanda, as his bill remains stuck in a deadlock after defiant peers again insisted on changes to the scheme.
Well, earlier today, Sir Keir Starmer was asked about the bill and whether the Labour Party are committed to tackling immigration seriously.
It is absolutely important that we stop the small boats coming across the channel. That has got to be done. And that's why I've always said we've got to take down the criminal gangs that are running those boats in the first place. And I'm determined that we will smash those gangs. What will not help is the Rwanda gimmick, which has cost an absolute fortune to remove a fraction of the people, £2 million per person. That money could be used to smash the gangs and stop this vile trade in the first place. So I would roll up my sleeves and tackle this in an effective way, not a gimmick.
I do love it when politicians wear high-vis vests and sort of hard hats and all the rest
Real
of it.
man of the people.
Really pretend that they've ever been on an industrial site before
Who
in their
doesn't
lives.
love wearing a high-vis and pretending they're something they're not?
Yeah, there used to be a website called PPE in PPE, which was about politicians with politics, philosophy and economics degrees wearing personal protective equipment.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds like an Instagram account.
Yeah, no, it's very, very funny. But shall we get some more with the political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal? James, we're going to start off with this Rwanda issue. Keir Starmer calls it a gimmick. The Prime Minister seems to think it's the magic solution. And the House of Lords are simply not playing ball.
Absolutely there, Tom. I mean, we hoped at the start of this week that it was going to be passed into law by the end of it, but actually the game of ping-pong has gone on longer than some previously thought. The Lords are really standing their ground, dragging their heels in all of this, and last night they were again sent back the legislation to the Commons with 2 amendments, which are now going to be debated, we think, into the start of next week. And really, of course, this is all timely because Rishi Sunak previously said he'd hope to get them off the ground by spring. I think you can just, if you sort of play around with the sort of calendar, you can just work out, if you think a sort of 6 weeks delay or so will mean that they could take off in June. So I don't know whether you consider that spring or summer or not. But really, it's about showing that the flights and the scheme is going to work before an election. And there's a difference of opinion within government between those who think, yes, this will be, a totemic thing and, it actually works as a real deterrent. Others are a bit more sceptical and say it's more about, at this point, proving a test of political virility and proving it can be done as a sort of point-scoring thing. But I do think that it really shows, if you look at immigration as one of the top concerns of voters, that something needs to be done. And the Tories at this point, it's been 2 years since the scheme was announced. They really need to get the legislation through and get the scheme up and running.
James, if they can't get this over the line today, what hope is there of them getting it over the line on Monday?
I think next week they'll be able to get it over the line. I think there was always a slight degree of concern at the beginning of the week, given the way in which tempers were rising in the upper house about this. They've managed to take, originally at the start of the week there were 7 amendments, now they're quibbling over 2. So Monday, Tuesday they should be able to get it over the line and royal assent in the middle of next week. There might thereafter be some kind of sort of tidying up exercise with the Rwandan government. But I think we should expect to see it into law next week.
Well, I'll believe it when I see it. But we do need to move on to this other story that is really engulfing the Conservative Party. Another week, another suspension of a Member of Parliament, this time Mark Menzies. Now, James, this isn't the first time that this particular MP has found himself in hot water. Yes, quite. I mean, 10 years ago, I remember being in the House of Commons and walking past 2 MPs on the day that he was actually featured in the news headlines. He was forced to resign as a parliamentary aide because he was caught up in a story involving a Brazilian rent boy. And he was described in that story as being a top Tory. And I remember one of the other Tories saying, well, if he's a top Tory, what on earth does that make me? But yes, Mark Menzies is now in the headlines again. And you sort of have to feel for Rishi Sunak. Every day he spends, working round the clock, Stakhanovite work ethic to try to shave, half a percentage point off inflation. And yet he wakes up again to headlines about involving more lurid claims involving his MP. And this is a very interesting story from the Times newspaper. Mark Menzies denies all the allegations, but again, it means that the Tories are on the back foot rather than leading on the attack against people like Angela Rayner.
James, it's a headache for Rishi Sunak, but does this actually translate into negative public opinion? To see that somebody like Mark Menzies had similar scandals before and then still was allowed to stand again in 2015, 2019. Does this actually translate into poor public opinion for the Conservative Party?
I think it's the difficulty of incumbent governments, which is that over time there are less and less people, less fresh faces to put in positions. It's a diminishing return element to this, Emma, and it makes it really hard. Boris Johnson was rare in 2019 in being able to pull off the trick of reinventing the Conservatives and running against his party's previous record and promising a different type of conservatism. I think this shows for Rishi Sunak it's now much, much harder, partly because we've seen, pandemic and Brexit and all that sort of, amount of energy that's taken out of the party, but also because, everyone's fresh in their mind about what happened with Liz Truss 18 months ago. So I think this gets to the sense of what Annalise Dodds called, sleaze and scandal swirling around the government. It's very difficult to sort of re-energise yourself and reinvent yourself when these kind of headlines are kind of sticking to you like mud day after day, week after week, month after month.
There is a part of me that does feel a little bit sorry for Rishi Sunak because, of course, this is this individual, this MP that's now lost the whip, Mark Menzies. Of course, he was an MP under David Cameron, chose to stay on, was re-selected, as you say, in 2015, and then under Theresa May, and then under Boris Johnson, under Liz Truss. I mean, he's been there all the time, and these allegations, this very peculiar 3 a.m. phone call demanding money from bad people, that is understood to have happened some time ago.
It does raise some questions, surely, about, you know, with William Ragg as well, that it raises some questions about the judgment of MPs, doesn't it, James?
Or of vetting.
It does. I mean, but again, you know, it's sort of like, you know, there's issues around Rishi Sunak, and I've spoken to people who criticise him for some such, you know, one issue or another. But on this, you know, what could he really have done? You basically inherit the party you're given by your predecessors. And it was a bit like in the Major government. A lot of things that blew up in the Major government actually happened under his predecessor, Margaret Thatcher. Things like the Matrix Churchill arms debacle. So I think that it's really hard for someone after this amount of time in government, when people basically have, you know, been going up to all sorts of stuff. No, these are just allegations right now, but things like coming on the back of the Will Ragg story, it just makes it really hard for the government to go out there and talk about the things it wants to talk about, like falling inflation, for instance, when, of course, we as political journalists all want to talk about the misdemeanours instead.
You're very right there. We have these meetings every morning and we have a discussion. What is more exciting to put on the telly box? Is it that inflation is down by 0.2%, or is it that someone's been into a bit of hot water, a bit of scandal, although they deny the allegations? But James Heal, thank you for joining us. Really, really interesting stuff there. Now, Prince William has returned to royal duties, out on his first engagement since his wife's cancer diagnosis. Well, our royal correspondent will keep us updated. We'll be with him next.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Men's mental health. Yeah. Men are starting to talk a lot more.
Yeah.
You've been through a lot of stuff that people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years for me have been very, very difficult. People see me on tour, performing, making music, but myself and my wife, you know, we went through 2 miscarriages. Oh. Wow. You know, and you know, for us, that was a very devastating time and very difficult to know how to kind of process those emotions. And I guess as a man, I did the thing of bottling up my emotions, and where I feel comfortable to be able to express myself is in the studio, whereas, you know, she had obviously a different reaction to, you know, what happened to us, because not only was it happening to her mentally, psychologically, but it was happening to her physically as well. And I think something that she really wanted to see from me was that sensitivity and that emotion. And I thought that as a man, being strong was trying to bottle up my emotions and just show her that, no, you know, that I'm being strong for her. But actually being strong is talking about it. And what's happened ever since I've started to talk about it is I've spoken to more men that have experienced baby loss. My wife forced out of me, you know, how do you feel? And I ended up as a mess on the floor. I was exasperating, crying, almost inconsolable. She was just holding me in her arms as we cried together, and we cried together. And I didn't realise I needed that release so badly. Like I said, I've been able to speak to other men, and we've been able to cry together, and they shared their own experiences, which they did similar to me. But actually, you know, as men, I feel like that conversation and that sensitivity and being able to be emotional together.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, Prince William has been out on royal duties for the first time since his wife Catherine's cancer diagnosis.
We can head live to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who is in Feltham, where Prince William has been visiting. Hi, Cameron.
Good afternoon. Well, this is the first time in more than 3.5 weeks that we have seen Prince William out on a public engagement. We did see him briefly with his older son, Prince George, at the Villa game last week, but all three of his children went back to school yesterday, and Prince William, clearly behind the scenes, has been supporting his wife following her cancer diagnosis. But his focus very much today was on his work, and specifically surplus food. So he visited a charity a little bit earlier today in Surrey called Surplus to Supper. It redistributes 3 tons of food a day to various charities around the area. And this month, it's celebrating a milestone. It launched in 2017, and it's going to hit 3 million meals, or the equivalent of 3 million meals, saved from landfill. And one of those areas that Prince William did today was helping them to pack the food, cook the food, and then he delivered them here to the Hamworth Centre hub. But before that, he was handed 2 envelopes by volunteer Rachel. Those 2 envelopes contained get well soon cards for both the Princess of Wales and His Majesty the King, both of which are still battling cancer. But at this youth centre here in Middlesex, they receive a box or a few boxes from this food distribution charity 3 times a week, and that really helps them with those vulnerable young people who use this service. I spoke to one girl, 15-year-old Ella, who uses that food to cook for her fellow young people and her peers here once a week inside this hub. She also had the chance to speak to Prince William, telling me he was really down to earth, really engaged in the kind of work that this youth centre does. But clearly this is a huge focus of Prince William's. He's very keen on preserving the environments for future generations. He sees a big part of that of reducing waste. His Earthshot Prize, which he set up in 2020, finding different solutions to repair the planet over the next 10 years, has a category in it called Build a Waste-Free World. So it all ties in to those key aims of Prince William's work. So although behind the scenes he's very much having to balance his being a father and a loving husband to a wife who is clearly still battling cancer and looking after 3 very young children, in front of the scenes, in public, he's very much focused on that key work where he tries to attempt to make the world a better place.
But Cameron, of course, at the forefront of his mind must indeed be his wife and his father, both suffering cancer. You told us about the cards he was given. What did you notice about how he's holding himself, about how he's coping, frankly, with the weight of this institution on his shoulders more so than ever before?
Well, I think it's very easy to put a brave face on, and you could really see that Prince William was very much engaged with the work that he had here. I think it's fair to say that he was very touched when he was handed those 2 cards. He told Rachel, thank you very much, that's really kind, but he didn't go into any detail about the princess's condition, as perhaps you would expect. As I said, his focus was very much on the work here, but clearly it is going to be a bit of a strain behind the scenes. There was a lot of social media speculation, wasn't there, about the princess's condition, and they asked for privacy over the Easter break so they could, as a family, come to terms with that diagnosis. But I'm getting the sense from Prince William really here today that he does want to continue as normal with his public work behind the scenes, with the Earthshot Prize, with this surplus food initiative which he's been supporting and spotlighting today. And I think we're going to see that going forward in the future. But of course, King Charles is still also battling cancer, although it appears his doctors seem to be suggesting, or sources seem to be suggesting at least, that things are going in the right direction. So I think it's looking positive as we go towards the summer.
Cameron, just quickly, did you pick up on, you mentioned the young person that you spoke to who said that William was very down to earth. Did you pick up on the atmosphere there? Was there a lot of concern expressed for Kate and the King, or were people more excited just simply to see William out and about again?
I think actually there was a bit of nervousness before Prince William arrived here because, of course, he is an incredibly high-profile figure in public life. And I think the focus here for them actually was not about the princess and indeed the king. It very much was on Prince William trying to spotlight those kind of initiatives when it comes to redistributing wasteful food and feeding communities. The cost of living, clearly something that has affected this area. I spoke to one member of the charity who said the demands for their services has really gone up over the last 5-6 years or so, and having someone like Prince William with his high profile spotlighting that makes more people in this local community aware of the growing problem.
Well, Cameron Walker, thank you very much for bringing us all of that from sunny Feltham, where it seems that the weather at least is on the up, as we hope is the King's health. Well, up next, 70,000 people have been victims of a huge online fraud operation. We'll have the very latest on that police investigation, which our cameras have seen. But first, your headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you. The top stories. Sir Keir Starmer says the Rwanda scheme is a gimmick and a waste of taxpayers' money in the wake of the latest blow to the government's flagship bill in the House of Lords last night. The Labour leader's comments come as Downing Street declined to recommit to the Prime Minister's spring deadline to get deportation flights off the ground. It is understood Number 10 will publish more detail about the timing of the first flights to Rwanda once the asylum legislation has passed through Parliament. MPs will consider the Lords' amendments to the bill next week, but the government has indicated it will not be making any concessions. Labour's calling for a police investigation into MP Mark Menzies, who's been suspended from the Conservatives over claims he misused thousands of pounds of campaign funds. According to The Times, he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who locked him in a flat and demanded thousands of pounds for his release. He denies wrongdoing, but the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says there are a lot of unanswered questions. For now, Mr Menzies will sit as an independent while those allegations are investigated. A man has been sentenced to 4 years in prison for a hoax terrorism campaign targeting primary schools, airports and shopping centres. In 2013, 64-year-old Gary Preston sent 42 envelopes containing white powder and threatening letters that caused panic and evacuations at various locations nationwide over a 6-week period. The envelopes contained talcum powder and threatening letters with Arabic text. One envelope led to the evacuation of a 300-room hotel. And as you've been hearing, some royal news. The Prince of Wales has returned to public duties for the first time since Kate's announcement that she's being treated for cancer. William's been meeting volunteers at a food distribution charity in Surrey. As well as lending a hand in the kitchen, he was also presented with Get Well Soon cards for his wife. The Prince's last official engagement was a month ago. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards, bringing the cloud and the outbreaks of rain. It won't rain all day, some drier spells, particularly in eastern Scotland, but the damp and drizzly weather is now spreading in across northern England. Much of the south, though, dry and fine, clouding over the Midlands and Wales, but we'll hold on to some hazy sunshine across southern England and East Anglia. And after that cold start, temperatures could creep up to 15, 16 degrees here, but it's a cooler day as the winds pick up further north with the outbreaks of rain. That rain will continue to trickle south, so it'll turn damp over the Midlands. Lincolnshire, East Anglia through this evening. Patchy rain then spreading across the southeast overnight. Much of the southwest staying dry. The winds noticed coming down from the north, but actually it'll be a much milder night tonight compared to last night because there'll be much more cloud around. Temperatures mostly holding up at 7 or 8 Celsius. So won't be as chilly first thing tomorrow morning. Will be quite a drab start. Cloud and rain over Wales and southeast England. That should tend to clear away, but lots of showers will come in over central and eastern parts. A much brighter day for western Scotland tomorrow. Northern Ireland cheering up too, with some good sunny spells developing in many areas through the afternoon. But the wind's still coming down from the north, so still bringing a fairly chilly feel.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Cheshire firstly, and still queues this lunchtime for the eastbound M56, 14 to Runcorn at 12. It follows earlier emergency repairs. All lanes are back open though, but it's still queuing. Staffordshire southbound, the M6 toll just after junction 11A, blocked and queuing. Slow back to Gailey at 12, a 3-car collision there. Northbound M23, Gatwick Airport at 9, up to the M25 junction 8. That stretch remains closed off. Big queues forming at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. If you're heading toward London, the M11 Harlow at 7 to the M25 at 6. The inside lanes combed off for recovery work. That's queuing. And delays on DFDS sailings of up to an hour and a half between Dover and Dunkirk this lunchtime. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 2. Now, we've been discussing, of course, an enormous number of topics today, and it's been a fast-moving news day. But it's not just us who'll be gracing your screens, of course. We're going to be going to Martin Daubney in just a moment to tell us what's coming up on his show, because you will no doubt want to stick around for it. There's an enormous amount happening today, of course.
What fresh hell might be unfolding in Westminster.
Oh, goodness me. Well, the thing is, MPs are all trotting off back to their constituencies this afternoon. So I don't think there's much business in Parliament, which perhaps is a big sigh of relief for everyone after all the debacle that went on with the Rwanda bill last night. No doubt Martin has some views on that.
It's probably going to be welcome relief for Rishi Sunak that the MPs are being released back into the wild.
Oh, or perhaps not welcome relief.
Maybe
what are they going to get up to at their weekends? Well, here's Martin Daubney. Martin, what's coming up on your programme?
Superb show. Emma doing a fantastic job. Complete natural. Well done. What's on my show? Well, Rwanda suffered a nightmare last night for Rishi Sunak. It's about to get a whole lot worse. We've got a fresh line on the Rwanda bill. It's turning into a nightmare for Rishi Sunak, as is yet another by-election, this time Mark Menzies. 1990s style sleaze coming back to haunt the Conservatives. Now, yesterday, you remember, I got very excited about the biggest St George's flag in Britain on the market square of my home city of Nottingham. Today, I'm asking, is it time for a minister for flags to protect our flags? Well, one Tory MP thinks so, and it's an idea that certainly floats my boat. Plus, is it time to ban smartphones for teenagers? Katie Ball from Spectator is coming on. I've got Annalise Dodds from the Labour Party, and Sir Steve Redgrave, the Olympic rowing legend, has lost his job at the BBC rowing department to a woman. If he's not safe, is any white man? That's all coming up on my show, 3 till 6.
Goodness me, a smorgasbord of stories there, Martin. Look forward to it. We'll see you from 3. Now, dozens of suspected cyber fraudsters have been arrested across the UK after authorities brought down an illegal website used by thousands of criminals, all to defraud victims across the world.
Police have identified at least 70,000 victims in the UK alone as sophisticated online enablers training criminals to set up fake websites to scam victims into handing over personal details. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has this special report.
Across the UK, dozens of suspected cyber criminals had a rude awakening as law enforcement here and around the globe moved in to smash a multi-million-pound online scam that's defrauded many thousands of victims. Multiple addresses were raided and some suspects were pulled off flights at Manchester and Luton airports.
You have been identified as involved in LabHost, an online phishing platform which allows users to set up fraudulent websites in order to impersonate online services such as banking.
This is now the front page, greeting any would-be cyber criminal trying to access the services of this illegal online site. The website LabHost is part of a hugely worrying development in cybercrime. It aimed to provide an easy step-by-step guide on how to download and use fake sites.
Your page has installed and you're ready to spam. Make sure to check that it works before starting your spam. Stay safe and good spamming.
Unsuspecting members of the public would then believe those sites were pages from legitimate businesses like banks and retailers, all with the aim of phishing, of fooling victims into revealing personal details which would be used to commit fraud.
There are, unfortunately, many enabling services to fraud. However, together with our law enforcement partners, we are tackling them. To take out an enabler means that we are able to take it out at source, and this, we hope, will send out a message to those using similar services that we can get their data and we will be onto them.
Law enforcement have identified at least 70,000 victims of this latest cyber scam in the UK alone. The LabHost site made more than £1 million from 2,000 criminals who subscribed to download its services. Those attempting to access the site now are faced with a bit of online trolling from law enforcement.
You've targeted victims all around the world. The police there may not be too happy with you. Think carefully about where you go on holiday next. That was your 2023 LabHost Wrapped. LabHost is dead now.
With that illegal site now infiltrated and disrupted by authorities, dozens of those it was training and equipping in the art of cyber fraud are in police custody and likely facing prosecution. Mark White, GB News.
We have Mark White, our Home and Security editor, with us now. Mark, can I ask you, why would these criminals do this? What benefit is it to them to share their secrets and their trade secrets with the public and anybody else who'd like to do the same?
Well, it's about making money, and they have made money, about £1 million from this one website, which is hosting these tutorials. 2,000 criminals so far had enlisted, subscribed to this website. And the longer that website was running, the more money the criminals would make. And it was a step-by-step guide, really, for even those with the most basic of technical knowledge would be able to, once they'd gone through this very short tutorial, be able to download these scam website alerts. So emails, text messages that would be sent out would send, for those that might fall for it, people to these fake websites where they would potentially hand over sensitive information, personal details that could be then used by the criminals to set up bank accounts in their name, get credit in their name, even apply for loans, or actually directly take money from them out of their accounts, depending on the kind of information that victims were giving over to these criminals. So I think the very worrying thing about these enabling websites, and it's not just this LabHost, there are multiple sites across the world that are springing up all of the time. And the really worrying aspect of it is that there was always a threshold. There's lots of criminals out there, but they don't necessarily have the know-how, the technical ability to set up scamming sites. This is giving them that. It will mean in the months and years ahead that many more people will be online and looking for potential victims out there. And given that all of us now, conduct so much of our life online, then it is a really, really worrying area in terms of how there is potential for people to be defrauded, in the interactions they have from the bank accounts and with retailing sites, whatever they're doing online, they could potentially be scammed.
What a unique story, and what a concerning one too, the sort of proliferation of these scammers. Mark White, thank you so much for bringing us all of that. But I suppose good news there, that they were caught. Now, coming up, Prince Harry declares his official country of residence as the United States of America. So is it goodbye to Blighty for good? That next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the Red Wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 3. Now, Prince Harry has officially left the country for the USA. Officially now, after confirming his primary residency is no longer in this country.
The change in residency status was seen in filings published by Companies House, where the Duke's country of residency is now listed as the USA, 4 years after initially making the move. That means it's final, doesn't it, Tom?
Yeah, that means it's all proper and official. But let's get more now with the royal commentator Angela Levin. Angela, thanks for making the time for us this afternoon. This is perhaps confirming what we knew all along. Prince Harry is now a Californian.
Yes, it's a huge change, of course, because how he'll be treated in the UK, how the obligations are far fewer and diminishing as we speak. But I think he said that because, again, he's so furious with how he thinks he's been badly treated. The date that he has changed was last year. No, he actually filled in the forms last year, but they were only released yesterday. But he actually did them on the day that he and Meghan had to leave Frogmore Cottage. They'd rented from the royal family, from the Queen. But as they were hardly ever there, the Queen had it in her mind that she would put Prince Andrew in there because he doesn't need a great, huge mansion. But that didn't work with Prince Andrew. But it was enough for Harry. He'd been there that year and barely used it, and that was the end of it. So they think, and newspapers as well have said they've been thrown out. But actually, lots of people get a time of a year, say, to use a flat or to use a home. So I think that's just being nasty about the royal family. But they have gone. So with that goes him possibly being a councillor of state. And these are people who can stand in for the monarch if they're away or unwell. There has to be 4 of them, and it has to be done by hierarchy. But the vital point is that they actually have a home in the UK. As he doesn't, that's the end of anybody's worries that he's going to sign a document one day if the Queen or if the King or anybody else is unwell, and actually, or hand it over to Meghan, and it'll be a complete disaster and fury amongst the population. So that's gone. It will also make it much harder for him to be looked after by the police when he comes over, because if he's not an English citizen, then he definitely won't have number 1 protection, and that is protection officers with guns. The rest are not. There's lots of very good protection officers, but they're the only ones that are allowed guns. And Harry has said he can't bring his family because of that. He doesn't feel safe. But now that's definitely out. And also he will perhaps stop his yearly sort of anguish about the British press, which he's trying to make it a whole different one and not be nasty and have misinformation. He's taken everybody to court that he possibly can. And I think that he will not be able to continue to go on and on and on about that.
Angela, do you think that this is a sign that Harry is finally accepting that he's made his bed and he has to lie in it, and now he's going to commit himself to being a Californian, and he's going to back out of any of these suggestions that he might come back to assist the royal family, which I'm sure many people, yourself and myself included, I'm sure, don't want that to happen?
I don't think so, actually. I think it's actually he's so angry with us in the UK, so angry with his family. It's a sort of remains of spare where he feels he's just been so badly treated. And I think it's sort of a nasty thing to do. I don't think he'll be happy doing that, because he did say, and he said many times before, London is my home, I love it, and it will always be that way. And I think he's done it just to say na 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 in words. But I don't see him being very happy. He's a very sad man, and nothing is quite right. And I think it will be something that he feels he has to do, not really wants to do.
Angela Levin, thank you very much for putting it in such eloquent terms. Really appreciate your contribution, as always. Thank you for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for, in fact, in the programme. Up next is Martin Daubney, and Emma Webb has been a marvellous sort of co-presenter throughout today. We're back again tomorrow.
Thank you, Tom.
So don't go anywhere. Stick with GB News for Martin Daubney, but also at midday tomorrow, it's us two again.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to this latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It's a fine day across the south today, but further north, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle as well. It was a chilly old start. Temperatures slowly picking up with a bit of sunshine in the south. Further north, though, sunshine in short supply because a set of weather fronts have been trickling southwards.